To open our program, we will hear a message from the chairperson of the Shielding Alumni Foundation of the Philippines. Elsit Panghilinan is a seasoned public servant and development professional with over 30 years of government service. He currently serves as the OIC president and CEO of the Overseas Filipino Bank and has held key roles in Land Bank, the Department of Education, and the Office of the President. A Chevening scholar with a master's degree from the London School of Economics, he is also a Humphrey Fellow from Boston University. Let us welcome Chair Elsie Panghilinan.
Good morning, and welcome to the second Kakpihan webinar series entitled Building Electoral Democracy, Voters' Education for an Inclusive Bangsamoro. We are honored to have you join us today as we explore key issues shaping the future of the Bangsamoro region. We have four distinguished speakers, all British Chevening alumni for this morning session. We have the BARM Cabinet Secretary, Astin Pendatun, to talk about the Bangsamoro Electoral Code, Attorney Maysara Latif on unlocking women's voices in Bangsamoro elections, Bam Baragir on rethinking strategies on voters' education, and Samira Gutuk on stories of displacement. Allow me to also thank our moderator, also a British Chevening alumni, Mr. Ron Astillas. We also recognize the enduring support of the British Embassy in the Philippines, whose commitment to peace building and inclusive development in the Bangsamoro region has been very instrumental. As former British Ambassador to the Philippines, Laura Bufis said, the United Kingdom has reaffirmed its commitment to continue supporting the Mindanao peace process and the reconciliation efforts in the Bangsamoro region. Moreover, we celebrate the contributions of British Chevening alumni whose global education and local engagement continue to shape peace-building efforts in Mindanao. This webinar forms part of a broader effort to build awareness and civic engagement ahead of the first Bangsamoro parliamentary elections. By fostering informed dialogue and inclusive participation, we aim to empower voters and strengthen democratic institutions in the BARM. As we begin today's discussion, we invite each of you to take an active role in shaping a peaceful and inclusive future, whether through civic engagement, policy advocacy, or community leadership. Your voice matters. Let this webinar be a catalyst for action, collaboration, and lasting change. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. Together, let us empower voices and secure peace. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay tayong lahat. This is Elsie Panghilinan, the Chair of the Chevening Alumni Foundation of the Philippines, Inc. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Panghilinan. Next, we will hear from the President of CAPFI, Dr. Irene Valones. Dr. Irene is a distinguished scholar and legal professional, serving both as CAPFI President and as head of the Supreme Court Savings and Loan Association Incorporated. A Chevening scholar with an LLM from King's College London and a Cambridge scholar, she has extensive experience in law, arbitration, and academia. Let us welcome Dr. Irene Valones.
Good morning, all. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this important gathering, our conference on empowering voices, securing peace, voters' education for the Bangsamoro election. Today, we are brought together by a shared commitment, not only to the democratic process, but also to the long-term peace development of Bangsamoro region. In every election, the power of the vote is the power of the people. In the Bangsamoro region, it is much more than that. It is a power to transform generations of struggle into hope. It is a power to honor our shared history while shaping a peaceful and dignified future for our communities. This conference is more than just an academic or civic event. It is an opportunity to ensure that the people of Bangsamoro are not only aware of their rights, but also be empowered to exercise these rights responsibly, freely, and without fear. Voters' education is not simply about knowing how to vote, but also what we vote for and who we are as a people. So it is about strengthening the democratic fabric of our exercise of suffrage, as well as the democratic governance of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. It is also about ensuring that every vote cast is a step towards peace, self-determination, and inclusive good governance. Let me take each and every one of you to have these important milestones with our partners in government, from civil society, the academy, the religious sectors, the youth leaders, law students, and peace advocates for being part of this mission. May this conference, organized by the Chibning Alumni Foundation Incorporated, inspire honest dialogue, thoughtful action, and unwavering commitment for peace, justice, and harmony. May we live not only with knowledge, but with a renewed purpose and determination to build a peaceful and empowered country and nationhood. Once again, have a safe and good day celebration with you all in this conference.
Thank you very much, President Irene. Now, to guide us through today's program, we are honored to introduce our moderator. Ron Astillas is an equality advocate, inclusive business champion, and the current chair of the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce. With more than 20 years of experience in international trade relations and public policy, Ron has served as the Philippines' lead negotiator for ASEAN and RCEP trade agreements. A shifting scholar with a master's degree from the University of Manchester, Ron continues to champion diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainable development. At this point, I turn to the floor over to our moderator, Ron Astillas.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Jazz. I hope you're all doing fine today, and we really look forward to an active participation from all of you. Thank you for spending your morning with us. I think this will be a very interesting discussion session, conference rather, given all our excellent speakers from the electoral code topic all the way to women empowerment, stories of displacement. So please, I highly encourage all of you to ask your questions later as to our speakers and by simply placing them in our chat box. So um, for the past few weeks, we've been hearing stories about the Bangsamoro. Even yesterday, we heard the news from the Supreme Court postponing the elections that's supposed to be happening this coming October 13. And just to contextualize, that's the reason why this particular Kapfihan really would like to focus on BARM, the Bangsamoro development. And when we did the first conference a few weeks back, we did have a conversation about this. Now we have an update, and I think there's no other better person to talk about the electoral code, the state of play when it comes to what will be happening in the supposed upcoming election period for the Bangsamoro, by but with no less than having the cabinet secretary of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao government. So let me now share with you a brief background of one of our good friends from the BARM. We are honored to have our Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Modestine Pendatun of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. He currently serves also as the program head of Ayudang Medikal mula sa Bangsamoro government. Before joining the BARM cabinet, Cabsec Pendatun worked for the Bangsamoro peace process, particularly in the Bangsamoro Transition Commission that drafted the then BBL, now the Bangsamoro Organic Law or BOL. Graduated from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where he finished his degree in sociology with honors cum laude. During his stay in UP, he became president of the UP Muslim Students Association and vice president for academic and research development of the UP Kalipunan ng mga mag-aaral ng Sosyolohiya. In 2015, He was one of the awardees of the prestigious Shielding Scholarship Program from the UK government, where he pursued his master's in peace and conflict studies at the University of Manchester. He graduated with distinction and was awarded the Humanitarian and Conflict Response Institute Prize for Outstanding Achievement for his dissertation entitled Bridging Top Level Assumptions and Local Level Aspirations, Civil Society, and the Bangsamoro Peace Process. He had a brief stint as part-time associate professor rather in the graduate school of the Notre Dame University, particularly in the Peace and Development Program, in which he shared and developed his research interests on local peace building and post-conflict reconstruction. All his achievements, big or small, he owes it to the humble beginnings of his life working for the peace process, not just for his professional motivation, but more importantly, for his moral obligation as a Bangsa Moro. My dear participants, conference attendees, I'd like to welcome my good friend, Honorable Asnin Pendato. Asnin, give the floor to you now.
Thank you very much, Ron. Full disclosure, Ron and I are batchmates. And of
Yes.
course, the best batch ever. All of us claim that our respective batches are the best ones, of course. Good to see you, Ron. Good morning, everyone. My utmost respect and courtesy to our chair of the CAFP, Chair Elsie, and President Irene, who is also a batchmate. So our we can really claim that we are the best batch ever. Good to see everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Isang maganda at mapayapang umaga po sa ating lahat. I hope my audio is clear and just to check if my presentation is seen by everyone.
Yes po. We can see it. I can see it.
Right. So this morning, as mentioned by Ron, I'm tasked to discuss the Bangsamoro Electoral Code, but allow me to express my apology if I'm not going to just discuss that alone. I find it necessary to also discuss some important context by bringing the brief background, some of the trends in the region, and of course, my main assignment is to look into the Bangsamoro Electoral Code and our preparations for the first parliamentary elections. So allow me to just breeze through my presentation so that we can have time for discussion. As you all know, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao is a product of a long, protracted social conflict, which were ended, hopefully, through the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. In 2012, a framework agreement on the Bangsamoro was signed, which essentially provides the basic principles. It became a base document for the 2014 Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro that outlines in further details the political structure, powers, and among other peace process mechanisms in the region. This was then ratified through the Bangsamoro Organic Law in 2018. It operationalizes many of the provisions, not all, of the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. The BOL, as we know it now, defines the structures of the regional government, its powers, its relationship to the national government. In 2019, such BOL was ratified through a plebiscite in January 21, 2019. It was ratified with the inclusion of Cotabato City. This was formally proclaimed in January 25 of 2019. Few days after that, there's another round of plebiscite conducted this month to determine the additional areas for the 63 barangays, or 67 rather, in which 63 opted to join, and another 6 municipalities from the province of Lanao del Norte. The difference for the February 6, 2019 plebiscite is the double majority requirement. Since we are crafting or getting them out of their mother municipality or province, a double majority was needed. So in other words, for the municipality, it's not if sufficient that they would vote for yes, the whole province would also need to affirm the vote for yes. In Lanao del Norte, the 6 municipalities voted for yes, but the province voted for no. Okay? For the 67 barangays, 63 voted yes, and the province of Cotabato, their respective municipalities opted for yes. So that's how the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is constructed right now. But of course, with the recent Supreme Court decision excluding Sulu, from the bar. This was later on altered through that Supreme Court decision. Okay, so that's just a very brief run through of how the bar is created. So the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao is still technically undergoing the very complex transition period. Under Article 16 of 11054, Section 1, transition period is essentially determined as a period in which the Bangsamoro Transition Authority is tasked to pass several legislations and for all intents and purposes build a regional government ready for the regular Bangsamoro government. So that's essentially the work of the transition authority during this transition period. But in the lens of peace builders, transition period in peace processes are arguably the most crucial, important, and defining stage of a transition period or a peace process rather. Okay, so what is the transition period or what are the expected um, work objectives of the BTA? I'll just go through some of the minimal. I mean, I say minimal, these are explicitly stated as requirements in Article 16 of RA 11054. The transition plan, this was already conducted or enacted in 2019 on June 17, basically outlining how the phasing out, the phasing in, the scheduling of the priorities, among others, of the transitional government will be carried out. The enactment of priority codes, it's still ongoing. Out of the 7 identified, only the revenue code is left for enactment. This was already submitted last year, and they are now at the committee stage. We're confident that before supposedly the October 13 elections, we will have this enacted by then. But for the others, administrative code, civil service code, education code, electoral code, local governance code, indigenous peoples code, these were all enacted already. For the determination of the parliamentary districts, and this is perhaps, we'll have a separate discussion on this later. In the previous exercises in which I was given the task to present an update on the BARM, I would take this as completed. but but now there's a question mark because of the recent Supreme Court decisions. On August 28th, the Bangsamoro Autonomy Act 77 was already signed into law, amending Bangsamoro Act numbers 58. I think this was discussed in the previous webinar, but just to provide additional context, the 32 seats in the parliament are called district representatives. And for all intents and purposes, these are similar to our congressional districts, in which the electorate of that district will have to vote directly for the representative. As I mentioned, Sulu was originally included in the BARM, and for Sulu, there were 7 parliamentary districts. These were now hanging after the Supreme Court decision excluding Sulu from BARM. So the Bangsamoro Transition Authority passed a law reapportioning or reappropriating the 7 parliamentary districts of Sulu to the other areas in the region. However, this was struck as unconstitutional. Before, there was a TRO issued barring the COMELEC from implementing BAA number 77. Okay, and then just recently, on October 1, the Supreme Court decided that the BAA number 77 is unconstitutional. Hence, we were directed to have a separate date for the elections. In other words, the October 13, 2025 parliamentary elections is now moved to a later date. Again, we'll have a separate discussion on this later. Part of the transition priorities is the gradual phasing out of employees. Okay, this has been completed, and the main task or the main challenge back then was to ensure that as we phase out and phase in employees, we are not going to disrupt government services. And I think in hindsight, we can say that this was achieved convincingly. Okay? Part of also the transition update is the institution of a placement process for hiring of personnel. We've launched a job portal, and just to provide a context of the magnitude of the work of getting the people, hiring the right people in the bureaucracy. The job portal received 964,272 applications for the 9,884 positions. So that's roughly 97 to 100. Say 97 to 100 applications per position. So ganun karami. And I pity the work of our human resource personnel because they have to go through this one by one. Documents, PDS, interviews, among others, to come up with a short list and eventually a recommendation for the appointment. Okay, and as mentioned, the continuity of government services, I think, was done despite the challenges of the COVID pandemic, for which hampered the region really for 2 years or so. And the full transfer of powers is still ongoing. Transfer of powers from ARMM to the BARMM. There are just some few that are being discussed in the Intergovernmental Relations Body. Okay, so that's the transition updates or transition priorities. Now, just like to get data just to see or provide an idea of the development gaps as well as the development gains in the region since we started in 2019. In 2019, the poverty incidence in the region was at 52.9%. Okay, so meaning more than half of the families in the region were considered poor. In 2021, this was drastically reduced to 28%. And at the time, it was the highest poverty reduction percentage-wise ever recorded. At first, we were also questioning the data. We were surprised. And apparently, with the PSA, the data is reliable. And it's the one that we officially use anyway, all of us here in the country. In 2021, the 2021 poverty incidence was further sustained in the latest 2023 poverty incidence record in the Philippines, in which 23.5%. We're now at 23.5%. And with this, for the first time in such a long history of the autonomous region, the BARM/the ARMM is no longer the poorest region in the Philippines. Okay. Well, we are the second poorest, but it's still very poor in the country. But for the first time, we were able to get out of that poorest region label. Okay, it's an achievement, but at the same time, it's a challenge for us because if you can see, from 52.9% to 28% to 23.5%, that's a very significant poverty incidence reduction. And yet, we are still the second poorest. Not the poorest anymore, but we're at the bottom three in the country. So it speaks a lot about the development gaps that we need to overcome just to be at par with the bottom rank in the country. So just to contextualize and give you a picture of where we're coming from and what we need to do to be at par with our fellow regions in the country, let alone with the national average. But hopefully, the trajectory is that we will continue to um, do this and reduce the poverty incidence to be at par. The national target is single digit poverty incidence. So we're still quite far from that national target. Okay? But from coming from where we are, it's a significant accomplishment that I think the autonomous government could be proud of. Okay? So just to provide you of the contributions to the growth on the supply side and the demand side. What I want to highlight here is that before, the region is known to be an agriculture dominant industry, or in terms of our economic performance, it's mostly agricultural. But now, services takes over. Pangalawa na lang yung agriculture, and then third will have the industry. So there's a paradigm shift in terms of our economic landscape in the region. Whether it's a good news or a bad news, we leave it to the economic managers, and that would be a separate discussion or topic altogether. Again, just to show the trend on the GRDP in the region. So this is the green ones are projections. So hopefully you will be able to reach such projected numbers. Okay. Now, on the main event of this morning's discussion is the Bangsamoro Electoral Code and the preparations for the first parliamentary elections. Okay. See, Bangsamoro Electoral Code is, as I mentioned, is one of the priority codes in in the transition authority that needs to be enacted. Okay, so it provides the structural, functional, and procedural principles in the conduct of the elections in the region. Okay, it is supervised by the Bangsamoro Electoral Office. So to simplify, this is essentially the regional office of the COMELEC converted into the Bangsamoro Electoral Office, pursuant to the requirements of 11054 or the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Parliamentary system is what we implement in the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, in which the chief minister, the head of the government, is not directly elected by the people. Rather, it is elected by the members of the parliament, an 18-member parliament. Okay, so the 18 members are composed of the following. We have 40 party seats, uh, um, we, and then we have 50%, that's 50% of 80, equivalent to 40 party seats. Then we have another 40% or 32 district representatives. Again, these are similar to our congressional districts. And 10%, or at least 8 seats, are reserved for sectoral representatives, namely women, youth, the non-Moro indigenous peoples, the Christian settlers, the traditional leaders, the ulama. Why? Because based on the previous exercise in the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, these sectors rarely, or they, not at all, they were not able to get a representation during the assembly or the previous legislative body of the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. So to guarantee that, the BOL provides for reserved seats for these sectors to ensure that their representation, that their voices will be heard in the parliament. When will the parliamentary elections be conducted? Of course, I just changed this recently, and by that I mean 15 or 20 minutes ago. According to the Supreme Court decision, we are scheduled to conduct the elections not later than March 31, 2026. But of course, if you're going to work back, we need to have another redistricting law. We need to have it passed to ensure that it will withstand constitutional challenges and ensure, more importantly, the representation of the people in the different districts of the park. So just like to highlight the key innovations in the Bangsamoro Electoral Code. For one, we have in the nomination of candidates, regional parties are required to have at least 30% of the party nominees are women. Okay? So this is an attempt to ensure that there would be more women representation in the party. So in other words, if a party A provides a list for the nomination of the party seats, at least 30% of that should be women. Okay? That's a requirement of the Electoral Code. Number two, we also have an anti-political dynasty provision, which in the national, we've been discussing this as one of the probable solutions to the political and electoral challenges and governance challenges that we have been encountering for the past few decades or so. But in the region, we started, well, not as strong as we want to. So for the anti-political dynasty provision, nominees submitted by political party shall not be related to each other within second degree of consanguinity and affinity. So for example, in Party A, bawal ang mag-asawa, bawal ang magpinsan in one party nomination. Okay, so it's a start. No? We are trying and testing the autonomy that was granted to us through this anti-political dynasty provision. Of course, this is being challenged before the Supreme Court right now, but at least in the region, what we discuss in the national or part of our discourse, the anti-political dynasty, we started something here in the bar, a bit the challenge before the Supreme Court. Turncoatism, changing of political parties or affiliation during the party representative's term of office shall ipso facto forfeit the seat in the parliament. So bawal po yung balimbing in the parliament in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. Official ballot for the region, it will include the names of the candidates, names of the party or the logo, and the none of the above option. Okay. So I think this was discussed in the previous webinar, so I'll not discuss this anymore. But it's one of the key innovations also in the Bangsamoro Electoral Code. There's a specific focus on the assistance to PWD and illiterate applicants. So the applications for registration of an illiterate or physically disabled person may be prepared by the relative within the civil degree, fourth civil degree of consanguinity or affinity, or by the election officer or any member of the accredited citizens arm using the data supplied by the applicant. Okay. Subject, of course, to further guidelines issued by the COMELEC. Six voters assistance desk, each voting center, voting voter assistances or VAD, will be administered by any duly accredited citizens arm under supervision and control of the Ministry of Basic Higher Technical Education. This we want to ensure that there would be more participation of civil society organization, what we call a neutral third party that will provide assistance and will act also as an additional eyes and ears for the conduct of the elections. There are still other provisions such as holding area in order to order of voting. Additional election offenses were also introduced in the Bangsamoro Electoral Code and specific prosecution of the vote buying or selling in the region. Some issues that really hamper uh, the credibility in some areas of election in the region. So these are innovations that hopefully will at least make it difficult for them to do so. Okay, special registration for sectoral voters. This was conducted already. And then there's a barn political party subsidy fund. A parliament may by law establish a barn political party subsidy fund, which may be used to support voters' education program and augment the operating funds of the registered political parties. This will hopefully um, increase the playing field or level the playing field for the small and big political parties. And just to go through some of the slides, allow me to go through this very quickly. 2 minutes. Okay, so we've commissioned a study conducted by the SWS. This was in October 2024. Okay, it is important to emphasize that this was conducted October 2024. Preparation supposedly for the May elections, and then eventually in October 13 elections, and now apparently for next year's election. We try to gauge the level of understanding of our citizens as to the difference of the parliamentary elections and the regional government or the previous election of the regional government. Okay, so for here, 18% is aware, only 18% is aware that the chief minister of Barm will not be directed or not be directly elected by its citizens. We ask this question because it unpacks several things. It dissects nuances that would suggest that a person has an idea of the difference and the importance of the parliamentary elections electing the chief minister in comparison to the previous exercises. 82% have heard or read about it just now. Okay? And the highest one was recorded in Cotabato City. But still, that was at 31% only who've heard about the chief minister, that they're not going to directly elect the chief minister. Okay, so needless to say, that's a very low number in terms of awareness of our people for the first parliamentary elections. Again, this was October 2024. After this, we've conducted several voters education campaign, education, now information throughout the region. And I would say that the 18% probably increase in by now, but we don't know the exact number yet because we haven't conducted a follow-up of such a study. But just to show that as of October 2024, that's where we are in terms of public awareness. And it helped us to recalibrate the strategy for voters education campaign in the region. For media access, this is where we are. What I'm going to highlight here is that before, when we speak of the region, we were thinking that it was TV and radio. But apparently, based on this, people are also shifting towards social media. Okay? The content, information consumption is also evident that there's been a paradigm shift. Okay? Oh, it's not here in the slide anymore, but there's also a slide saying that the public is now consuming their information, news, more on social media. Okay. So I think it's important to highlight that so that for people, organizations, and groups who would want to do a strategic voters information campaign would have to consider that now in the region, it's no longer TV and radio, the dominant ones. It's also the social media. It's an advent really of the access also of internet connection in the region, as well as the Starlink. No, it's a reliable internet connection in the far-flung areas of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Luzon. So that's all from my end, and I look forward to your questions and clarifications later. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jasnine. Quite an informative presentation. Definitely, we'll have more questions later. So, for all our participants, just write your questions. At the end of all the presentations, we'll be doing a question and answer open forum with our experts. Ayan na, umiinit na yung umaga. Maganda na ng ating usapan. Salamat at naumpisahan natin with Asnin. Ngayon, we're moving to another lecture topic. As you said, we'll all focus on the Bangsamoro development. But this time, we are looking at how to unlock women's voices in Bangsamoro elections. And we are honored to have Commissioner Attorney Maysara Dandamun Latif, who was a chairperson of the Marawi Compensation Board in 2023-2025, established to educate and compensate families who are victims of the Marawi siege. She was a legislator at the Bangsamoro Transition Authority as member of the parliament, a commissioner at the Bangsamoro Transition Commission that drafted, lobbied, and pushed for the passage and ratification of the BOL. For 15 years, she served as a public interest and state welfare lawyer as a senior state solicitor at the Office of the Solicitor General. In 2021, she was chosen and awarded a full scholarship by the Department of National Defense for an executive master's on national security administration. She earned with merit a degree of Master's in National Security Administration and belonged to the pioneering batch of government executives. 2006, she was awarded a full scholarship by the prestigious Shielding Scholar of the British Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office and earned a degree with merit in Masters in Educational Leadership and School Improvement at the University of Manchester, UK. She is also a candidate of Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Administration and Development at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Graduated with a Juris Doctor degree at San Beda College of Law, Manila, and bachelor's degree in public administration at the UP Diliman. She cares about youth, women, children, and peace. So, my dear participants, guests, let's now welcome Honorable Maysara Latif.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ron, for that wonderful introduction. And of course, everyone here who are available for our webinar series, our second in the Chevening Alumni Foundation of the Philippines Incorporated, including the students who are here. I'm really happy that they are here for this webinar. This is really for them so that they will know what's happening in the Bangsamoro as well as how to unlock women's votes in the Bangsamoro. So let me share my screen. Good morning also to our president, Irene, and our past president, Elsie, as well as other members of the CAFE. So let me share my screen on unlocking women's votes in Bangsamoro. So how do I share my screen? Okay. So, can you? I don't know how to
Our
open
tech team, yeah.
my allowed to
Uh,
to share screen.
Share screen,
Okay.
yeah. Let's see. Rod, can we give screen sharing to Miss Maysara?
Yes, hello, Sir Ron. I think we already shared um
Okay. Let
the
me.
ability. Ma'am, maybe if you can send us the presentation, we can flash it for you.
Okay. How do I send my presentation?
Let's
On Zoom po, ma'am, there's a arrow at the bottom of the Zoom that says share.
share. Yeah,
Click that.
this
Okay. So I saw already. So allow to share window or allow to share screen.
Allow to share uh screen po.
Screen. Wait. Sorry for this technical. Anyway, I'm going to discuss a very rooted in history, no? Kasi I've been with the Bangsamoro Transition Commission, the one that pushed for the passage of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So, i-discuss along with my other topics. Medyo nagkakahirap. So, wait lang ha.
our participants are patient naman. So they're looking forward to your discussion. So just let's hang on until the screen is shown. Uh,
Of course, our yes, our topic is really important. Women participation, screen sharing. So this is my screen actually. Oh, wait lang ha. I opened already my slides actually.
I think we saw your presentation, Attorney Maysara. As I said at the start of the panel, the session, no, just keep your questions, no, and we'll be very much happy to address them. And again, with all the interesting topics. So there, I think ready na yung slides ni Attorney Maysara. I see the first slide.
Okay na? So hello, can you see
Yes.
my presentation already?
Yes, yeah. You can already see your presentation.
Okay. Okay, so as you can see, the image in the screen is about women. I'm very happy that during the passage of the Bangsamoro Organic Law, a lot of women participated and lobbied for its passage. Without the women's voices, I believe hindi tayo darating sa punto na magkakaroon ng Bangsamoro autonomous government. Kasi sabi nila, sometimes only guns speak, no? Sabi nila, only those men who carry firearms or guns are the ones being listened to by the government. But I beg to disagree because what I saw, what I witnessed during the time of the passage of the Bangsamoro Organic Law was that it was women, especially those who are widows of war, orphans, also children, who are very heavily invested in achieving peace in the Bangsamoro. That's the reason why I'm so inspired by them that during the passage and the ratification and lobbying, I really participated and gave my very best after my work in the Office of the Solicitor General. So, where are we here? So, then my next slide is about why is it that we're talking about peace in the Bangsamoro? It's a region really that is emerging from conflict. The Bangsamoro Autonomous Government is born out of 500 years of conflict. Can you imagine? According to the World Bank, the Bangsamoro next to Sudan is the world's longest conflict, no? Beginning with the Spanish colonization in the 1600s up to the present negotiated political settlements, as our CABSEC Asnin has said, the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, to end war between the government and Moro rebel fronts. Ito pong Bangsamoro ay hindi bago. Ito po ay 500 years in the making. 500 taon, no? It's about the people, their nation states, and kung saan sila nanggagaling. May pinanggagalingan po ang Bangsamoro. So, ano po ba ito? Yung ating adoption ng Comprehensive Agreement of the Bangsamoro between the government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front in 2014 led to the establishment of what we have today, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. It was a product of a ratified law, the Bangsamoro Organic Law in 2019, and marked a potential new era of peace in southern Philippines. After decades, no, mga dekada, 50 more years of armed conflict and chronic insecurity in the region. Bakit pinapakita natin sa screen that there are women, the women who are behind, no, the breakthrough between the MILF and the government? It's because the Philippines has seen a robust women's participation in peace negotiations between the Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front in 2014. The parties signed a comprehensive peace agreement after 17 years of negotiations. So negotiations, no, it really takes a lot of patience between the parties, between the government, between the rebel fronts. The peace agreement was hailed for its strong provision on women's rights, as well as for women's political, social, and economic participation. Women played active roles and participated in both formal and informal negotiations. Sa formal po, makikita natin ang ating dating chief negotiator for the government, si Miriam Coronel Ferrer. She was also awarded a Magsaysay Peace Award, as well as former Secretary King Deles, and of course the MILF side, si former Chief Minister Ibrahim Morad, and Mohagir Iqbal, and our former president, as well as the Malaysian facilitators. These women no, led the Philippine government's team in achieving a breakthrough, and they made history in becoming the first woman chief negotiator to sign a major peace deal according to history. So as you can see, women held a number of meaningful positions, not only politically, but also in terms of peace building, and most importantly, in negotiation. Magaling po tayo sa negotiation according to research. Women also fostered great communication between tracks of negotiation, civil society groups. Without them, we would not also achieve this breakthrough, and other women's group. The resulting peace agreement included a number of gender-specific considerations. Yung pong ating Bangsamoro Organic Law ay napakaraming gender-specific provision. For example, women's inclusion in institutionalizing mechanism for women's economic participation. It's a very crucial part of our broad national strategy for growth and post-conflict. The 2014 Comprehensive Agreement aims to address minoritization and landlessness brought by series of resettlement programs. Nagsimula pa po ito noong 1900 sa American colonial governments and succeeding governments led by massive organized migration to Mindanao, mostly non-Muslims. No? This is according to a study conducted by Colonel Ferrer Miriam in Autonomous Region, the Search for Viable Autonomy. Sinabi din niya na ang relative deprivation and underdevelopment is one of the causes of the armed conflict, as well as political and cultural marginalization and communal violence and militarization. Why do we need to know the root causes so that we will be able to address this, no, at hindi na siya maulit muli? And as can be explained in the next graphic, ano ba yung cost of war? Ano yung nagiging resulta kapag nandyan tayo sa gera? As explained, the cost of war from 1970 to 2000 led to massive economic loss of 20 billion per year. Sa 1970 pa yan ha, or 640 billion until 2001. This in terms of damages to businesses and properties. Mind you, kung nakita nyo po yung devastation and scale dito sa Marawi, no, it's just a fraction of what happened really in the Bangsamoro. Kasi ito po ay decades na destruction. There were potential investments and business in the region that had been stalled also because there's no peace and security. Sino nga na ba na mag-invest sa isang region na walang peace and order or stability? So, for the past 50 years or decades or so, wala po kayong makikitang malalaking investors like Ayala, yung ating mga malalaking businesses outside, international, dahil po sa kakulangan ng peace and security. Also, 25 years ago, nagkaroon po ng all-out war policy between the former President Estrada and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front that costed the country 1.3 billion. So, from 1970 to 1996, you can see na ang combat expenses po ay umabot ng 73 billion. So, napakalaki ng na gastos na Google ng sana napunta sa social services and basic human needs ng ating gobyerno, pero napunta po sa giyera. As for human casualties, ang dami din pong namatay. 120,000 people were killed between 1970 to 1996. Half of them were rebels and 20% civilian, women, men, and children, or 24,000 at 36,000 soldiers from the AFP Armed Forces of the Philippines. Itong human casualties ay hanggang ngayon intergenerational na nararamdaman sa bawat kwento, sa bawat kahirapan na nararanasan ng mga orphans at saka ng women, no? Na sila yung naging breadwinner. Kwento po nila palagi, ano nangyari sa kanila, siya, mga anak nila, nawalan sila ng all of a sudden ng breadwinner dahil dito sa gera, no? So the war also led to massive social welfare disruption during this war. Almost in 2000 alone, no, in the year 2000, nakita ko po yan na almost 1 million people were displaced. And that time, this was one of the world's largest displacement in the year 2000. In 2008 naman po, after the failure of the MOA AD, yung Memorandum of Agreement signing between the government, 600,000 people flee for their life and were displaced, and they were called internally displaced. War brought cycle of violence and injustice. Nagkakaroon po ng disruption in development efforts, destruction of environment, multi-generational effect, and poor sense of well-being and security. In fact, sa Human Development Index, kami po sa Bangsamoro has the lowest ranking compared to other regions. Kung meron ka nga namang 70 years of protracted war, beginning sa 500 years of ago pa, no? What would you expect sa aming region? Nanganak na naman po ang gera na ito noong 2017, no? Naranasan natin ang Marawi Siege. 5 buwan nagkaroon ng conflict between the ISIS-inspired terrorist groups and government. Nagkaroon ng 400,000 people na internally displaced or bakwit. 9,000 houses destroyed, 1,000 dead, and an estimated 82 billion lost to public and private property. Why do I know this? Personally, I was the chairperson of the Marawi Compensation Board. We received over 14,500 application for property damages and loss of income, no? And also 1,000 for the missing and the dead. Yan po ang scale and devastation and magnitude ng war. And up to now, 8 years, wala pa rin pong masyado nakakabalik dahil ang ating compensation, no, na ginagawa ay quasi-judicial. Kailangan masusi, tinitingnan maigi kung ito pong mga pinipresent na document ay talagang pwede natin gamitin pagbayad dahil 42 billion po ang claim, no? So ito ay pera ng taong bayan, kailangan din pong ingatan. So binabalance po natin yung need ng ating IDP as against yung ating guidelines government sa pag-release ng pondo. Ganun po tayo kaingat. So, to put an end to war, in July 2018, the Bangsamoro Organic Law was enacted. It was in peril during 2017. Muntik na naman magkaroon ng mamasapano, no? Like in 2015. Buti na lang po yung Marawi Siege, it did not let Congress detract its work to passage of the Bangsamoro. Instead, nagkaroon po tayo ng Bangsamoro Organic Law. Ito po, ang bumoto po dyan ay almost 1 million na voters or 98.7% ang bumoto ng yes to peace, yes to Bangsamoro, signifying people's overwhelming desire to end decades of war and the beginning of peace in Bangsamoro. Yan po ang ating history. Sa mga kababaihan, ako po ay talagang saludo sa inyo dahil sa inyo po nagkaroon tayo ng napakagandang batas, no? Na sabi ko nga na magkakaroon tayo ng enabling conditions for where peace should be realized dahil napakalaki po ng power na binigay sa Bangsamoro political as well as economic, social, and other powers. So where are we now? Saan na po ba tayo sa gender parity? Sa usapin na ito, kailangan po natin maintindihan na saan ba ang kababaihan sa ating bansa, no? According to key findings and statistics na ating recent study, merong in 2025 midterm election alone, no, there are 31 women who won gubernatorial or independent city mayoral races. That's 6 more in 2022. And 72 women secured congressional seats. Ilan po ba ang governor sa Philippines? 72 po ang governor, no? So, 31 po ang parity natin. So, nationally, 25% po yata ang ating parity. However, nung in-score po tayo as against the world, no? We rank 71st out of 193 UN member. Sabi nila, not bad kasi tayo daw po Pilipinas ang nangunguna sa East and Southeast Asia for women's representation in government. So, women constitute more than half of registered voters. Bakit ganun? 50% ng registered voters ay kababaihan. Pero isa lang sa 5 kandidato ang women. So may disparity po talaga dahil walang equality. 71st out of 193 ang ating Women's Power Index in 2024. And ating score ay 29.8, napakababa pa rin, over 100. So kung makikita nyo, na doon pa rin tayo sa mababang antas ng equality in terms of political empowerment and political participation. Sa Bangsamoro naman po, nasaan na po tayo, no? Sa Bangsamoro. Sa Bangsamoro po, the Bangsamoro Organic Law stipulated that the government should ensure inclusion of women's agenda and involvement of women and youth in electoral nomination process for political parties and should allow women's meaningful participation in all levels of decision making. For the BARM, ang key findings naman po ay ang BTA had its number of women members reduced, no? Nung time ko po, noong 2019, 16 po kami na members of the parliament out of 80. So 16 is measly around 20%. And then in 2025, na further reduced to 10, na ipamigay na naman po yung 6 na posisyon. Sa kalalakihan, so naging 12.5% lang po kami, sabi na aming statistika, no? So, sa Electoral Code, meron naman pong effort na magkaroon ng 30%. Ano ba yung 30%? Ito po yung sinasabi natin na margin na kailangan para magkaroon ng magandang decision making sa Parliament. So, pasensya na kayo. Excited lang po ako mag-present kasi this is women, very close to my heart. So, each regional political party has to nominate 40 names, sabi dito sa Electoral Code. Yun yung pangalawang strategy, no? Na at least 30% must be women. So, sa 2025 Parliament election, napakaraming parties na nag-meet ng 30% threshold. Yan po ang good news kasi yung Moro Ako party list, party, mayroon siyang 62.5% women nominees. So, tandaan niyo po, yung Moro Ako, no? Meron siyang 62.5. Yung iba naman po na major political party, nasa 30 to 35%. Nasa threshold pa rin naman po. Pero nagpapasalamat po ako dito sa isang major political party, Moro Ako, karamihan po dito ay kabataan, ay meron po silang 62.5%, times 2 pa po nung threshold. And then meron tayo sa Bangsamoro Organic Law at saka sa Bangsamoro Electoral Code na isa, no? Isa lang na sa sector representative, women sector representative. Iba po ang pagboto sa kanila at isa din sa Council of Leaders. So parang sa akin tokenism masyadong mababa, isa lang, no? Ang ibinigay para sa sectoral seats, samantalang 50% po tayo ng population. So, meron pa rin po tayong pwedeng gawin dyan na pagbabago. Maaari po tayong magsulong ng batas para dagdagan po ang sectoral seat dahil napakababa po ng iisa lang na sectoral seat para sa kababaihan. So, bakit po importante ang conversation na ito? So, patungo na po tayo sa importance. Nakita niyo po yung itong image na ito. Ito po yung first BTE Parliament. Kasama po ako dyan. 80 po ang membro dyan. At ang kababaihan po during my time ay around 16. Iba po ay hindi kasama. Kung makikita niyo po, napakaliit po ng aming population compared do sa mga kalalakihan. So, talagang there's a real need to equalize our participation for our for a more inclusive at saka more diverse decision making and policy making. Sa pag-aaral po ng over 500 studies on women political leaders and their impact on gender and democracy na kinonduct ng King's College Global Studies, 500 na research sa women political participation, hinighlight po nila na women participate in all aspects of political life, no? Including members of parliament. Ang kababaihan naman po ay araw-araw ay gumagawa po ng kanilang trabaho, hindi lang sa loob ng gobyerno, kahit sa labas po, meron po silang piniplay na role. So, societies become more equitable and democratic when there are lots of women involved in decision making. In other words, when women take part in politics, the whole of society benefits. So, what are the key findings of the studies that I've mentioned by King's College of London Global Institute for Women's Leadership? It says that in public life and politics, women policymakers prioritize issues that benefit the most vulnerable in societies, like healthcare, welfare, and education. As such, more women leaders seem to make for more equal and caring societies. Yan po yung na-yield ng research. Women may be more likely to focus on these issues because they have greater experience of deprivation and because they are often responsible for caring for others. Alam po natin yan na multiple roles ang kababaihan, no? Siya yung sa bahay, tahanan, ilaw ng tahanan, siya rin yung sa trabaho, leader. On average, women work harder than men, sabi ng research, hindi po ako yung nagsasalita, to represent their constituencies, which is linked to greater and stronger sense of among voters that government is really responsive to their needs. There is increased representation of women in elected office is associated with counteracting corruption and focusing resources on the quality and consistency of public service. States where women hold more political power, ito po yung pinaka-important sa atin sa context ng Bangsamoro, states where women hold more political power are less likely to go to war and less likely to commit human rights abuses. Yan po yung nasa study. Napakagandang result po yan na study na na-found out na kapag mas maraming kababaihan na nakaupo sa table, sinasabi nating table ng kapangyarihan, mas less likely po na go to war, magkagera, at mag-commit ng human rights abuses ang gobyerno. Women bring collaborative and inclusive leadership style into political environments and are often characterized by Division 1 upmanship. Hindi po kababaihan, hindi masyado siya doon sa masculinity, no? So most more on siya sa collaboration. Together, these factors represent the key ingredients to drive economies, ensure stability, and improve quality of life. These are the yields of this study. So, napaka-important talaga ng political participation at political leadership ng kababaihan. Ano po ba yung barrier o yung naghahadlang para makamit ng kababaihan ng sinasabi napaka-elusive na political power or women participation? And why are women's voices silenced? In the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, it presents a political landscape heavily influenced by male dominance. Ito rin po ay sinasabi rin ng isang study, a pattern prevalent in many parts of the world. This gender imbalance presents substantial challenges for women members, especially yung mga MPs, who struggle, members of the parliament. Kasi magkaiba po ang tawag sa Bangsamoro, sa mga legislators, MPs po, members of the parliament, who struggle to assert their presence and impact decision-making. Napakahirap. Ako po, masasabi ko po mamaya sa inyo yung personal journey ko as a former member of the parliament. Ano po yung naging journey in terms of political participation. The predominance of male leaders, makikita nyo naman po yung from the speaker to the deputy speaker to the chief minister, kalalakihan lahat, no, mga ministers, often leads to marginalization of women's voices and women's perspectives, making it difficult for us, no, parliamentarians, to have our voices heard in political forums. The deeply rooted social, cultural, economic, and political barriers or challenges in Barm further exacerbate the challenges faced by women in the political arena. The traditions often dictate rigid gender roles. No? Sinasabi nila mga kababaihan na hindi dapat magkamit or mag-ambisyon na maging presidente o maging chief minister o maging head. Yan po dahil meron po silang mga sinasabing mga cultural, religious norms, no, na ginagamit laban dun sa idea na maaaring maging head ang kababaihan. Such norms can be particularly discouraging for us women to aspire to enter male-dominated spaces in politics. We are often seen as outsiders or ambisyosa, yun ang tinatawag. Sa amin, no? Pagka nag-ambisyon ng kababaihan ng mas mataas na posisyon para makapagserbisyo, tinatawag na ambisyosa. Yan po ang narinig ko minsan sa usapan. Norms are linked to women's access to time, freedom of choice. Nalilimit po kami dahil ang dami rin naming responsibility both at home and at work and movement required to fully engage in politics. So women's participation is still viewed by some as counterproductive to traditional family roles, no? And reinforcing the stereotype that politics is not appropriate domain for women. Aside from this, wala din tayong access to finance, no? Financial constraints, napakataas din ng security risk, at napakababa ng voter education on gender-sensitive leadership, at limited din ang support sa community. These are additional challenges to women from entering politics. So, paano ba natin ma-unlock or yung silence na yun ay magkaroon tayo ng maingay na voice, no? How do we move forward? So sa pag-aaral din, nakita na kailangan natin magkaroon ng at least 4 na strategy. Yung policy and legal strategy, yung mobilization and voter education, capacity building, inclusive peace and governance. So sa policy and legal strategy, napakaganda po na i-institutionalize natin yung gender quotas. Sinabi natin kanina, 30%, kapag 40 ang party nominated, 30% non minimum ay kababaihan. At tingnan po natin maigi kung sino yung mga kababaihan din po at paano sila inilagay doon. Kasi may tinatawag po tayo na zipper system at saka yung alternate. So kung number 1 mo ay kalalakihan, dapat number 2 ay kababaihan, number 3, kalalakihan, number 4, or pwede ring number 1 yung kababaihan. Kasi ang nangyayari po, nasa tail end yung kababaihan, so hindi na po sila papasok kung ang percentage lang po ng nakuha ng party ay mababa, hindi na po papasok yung kababaihan kasi nasa mababang bilang po sila. So kailangan po natin pag-aralan maigi. Paano po sinisituate ng mga parties ang kababaihan sa kanilang listahan? Maging mapanuri din po tayo dyan. Kasi minsan nate-teknikan din po tayo, mga kababaihan, nilalagay sa tail end. So wala rin po tayong pag-asa kapag mababa lang po ang nakuha ng party. Let's say sa voters, ang nag-turn out lang ay 10% lang ang nakuha niya. So 10% ng 40 ay 4. So kung ang kababaihan ay nasa pang-5, pang-6, pang-7, pang-8, pang-9, ay hindi na po makakapasok sa 40 na yon. So we also need to strengthen implementation of gender and development mandates during the election period. Napaka-importante po yung 5% na sinasabi natin ng total budget ng bawat ahensya na isama po yun at talagang i-implement, hindi po yung mga token na magbigay ng t-shirt, mag-zumba-zumba, yun po yung nakikita natin regular ng mga gender and development activities, no? Pero pag dating po ng sa election, dapat po during the election yung ating mga gender and development advocates mas mag-ask sila for greater implementation kung ano ba yung para sa kababaihan. And we also need to institutionalize gender-sensitive political training programs for candidates and parties. Bakit napaka-important nito? As I said kanina, maraming misconception, maraming norms po against women leadership. Sa amin po, na-experience ko yan, kababaihan dapat sa bahay lang, kababaihan na mag-aalaga ng mga bata, wag mag-aspire for political office, hindi sanctioned yan ng ating religion. So napakadami po na dapat natin i-disabuse sa mind ng ating mga botante. At dapat din i-train din po natin yung mga candidates, hindi lang po yung kababaihan, pati yung kalalakihan about gender sensitivity. As well as political parties. Kasi minsan ang political parties, sila po yung barrier para makapasok tayo sa political participation. Aside from yung ating policy and legal strategy, we also have grassroots mobilization and voter education. I-discuss po yan mamaya ni Bam about voter education. Pero I'll run through it. We have to engage women's organization, religious leaders, and youth to support women candidates. I'll add to that also yung mga political parties. We have to promote voter education, focusing on women's rights and leadership qualities. At the barangay level, we have to have dialogues to change perceptions about women in power. Kung may mga misconception, dapat iklaro. So, at least maiwaksi, mawala. For capacity building, for aspiring and future women leaders, magbigay po tayo ng mga mentorship and training programs for young women and first-time candidates. Napaka-important yung leadership training. Ako po, yan po yung aking pinag-aralan na leadership is not just yung sinasabi natin in positions in power, but also about your character, about your authenticity, yung pong trust na meron po ang mga tao sa inyo. Yan po, hindi lang yung about power relations, hindi lang yung ano yung mandato, kundi paano i-build yung character ng ating mga kababaihan at young women sa pagiging leader. You have to have courage. Naalala ko nga yung si Senator De Lima. So, teacher ko siya sa San Beda and I really admire her. And my son even wrote to her how he admires Senator De Lima as well as Senator Risa Hontiveros for really taking the cudgels for women, standing up against power, napaka-power, against powerful men, So, ito po, magbigay po sana ng inspiration sa atin ng ganitong mga kababaihan. Encourage creation of women's political caucus and networks in BARM. Hindi natin kaya yung trabaho. Kailangan, meron tayong women's political networks or caucuses man lang. We need to have, sabi nila, you may agree to disagree, no? Hindi porket hindi mo kaalyado, hindi mo nakakausapin or hindi kayo makakapag-arrive at some political intersection. So, maaari din po tayong mag-build ng networks based on our shared and common interest sa mga kalalakihan o kababaihan. And then lastly, inclusive peace and governance messaging. I-frame po natin na ang ating participation ay essential to peace building. Sabi ko nga, there can be no peace without women. Yan po yung isa sa mga battle cry ko nung ako po ay Bangsamoro Transition Commissioner habang sinusulong yung Bangsamoro Organic Law. There's no peace without women. There's no justice without women. Ang kababaihan ay napaka-importante sa peace building. At nakita nyo naman po na sa mga nagsulong at nagkaroon ng realisasyon, kababaihan pa rin po ay nasa forefront. Showcase successful women leaders in BARM to inspire others. Napakarami po natin na makikita na women leaders na maaaring mag-inspire din sa ating kabataan. So, yun po yung apat na nasasabi kong maaaring strategiya para ma-unlock natin at napakarami pa po. Pero para sa akin po, nung ako po ang upo bilang interim parliament, member of the parliament representing women in the government side, noong 2019 po, out of the 80 interim members appointed by President Duterte in the parliament, there were only 16 women MPs, less than 20%. So the same is true in 2022, the second BTA, and also in 2025, the number from 16 ay naging 10. So imbis na dumami po, nabawasan pa yung 6 na ipamigay pa sa kalalakihan, or 12% na lang po ang natira sa kababaihan sa interim Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament. This figure, 12%, is really short of the 30% critical mass, according to scholars, na can be useful for minimum threshold for minority groups to influence decision-making effectively. Dahil minority na po kami, mas na minoritize pa kami. So hindi po kami naka-reach ng 30% critical mass threshold. The underrepresentation of women in the Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament created an imbalance in legislation as well as governance of the region. Women's voices and participation in policy and decision-making are essential in achieving sustainable peace and development. Without our adequate and meaningful participation, representation, and protection, our region's development will still be unstable and peace elusive. Yung kwento nga po ng isang widow, after the war has natapos, sila po yung heavily devastated dahil sila po yung nawalan ng asawa, anak, na katuwang sa kanilang pagtaguyod ng pamilya. So it's women who carry the brunt of war. As a former member of the parliament of the first BTA, I experienced how hard it is to pass legislations for women, for children, and for gender. For example, yung resolution na lang namin isa lang, Hijab Day, ay napaka-fierce ng opposition ng kalalakihan sa parlamento. Pero hindi po ito nag-detract sa amin na ipasa yun at talagang kausapin yung mga ibang kalalakihan na may simpatya o naiintindihan kung saan nang galing kababaihan at naipasa rin po yun. Pero so much heartache yung isang araw na yun ay napakabigat po na araw para sa amin. So for more than 3 years, I authored several bills, resolution, and privileged speech, speaking truth to power. And one of the highlights of being a woman MP or representative is co-authoring and pushing for the creation of the Bangsamoro Women Commission. Ito po ngayon ay nakatayo na at siya po ngayon ang nag-i-implement ng mga polisiya para sa kababaihan. Naggagawa po, policymaker po, ng mga polisiya para sa kababaihan para i-implement ng gobyerno. At siya rin po yung gender ombudsman. Ibig sabihin, tinitingnan kung ito pong mga polisiya ay nai-implement at pati ang budget na 5% ay nai-implement na para sa kababaihan at sa gender. So this one of the very first institution established in the newly created BARM took care of our issues on women. So aside from that, ano pa po ba yung as a women na kaya pa natin i-champion Chinampion natin yung Women Peace Rehabilitation of Marawi at nagkaroon nga din po ng Marawi Program Office. Yung mga young people involved in violent extremism, magkaroon ng mga programa para sa kanila, magkaroon ng greater funding for education, social services, environment, and health. Kasi ito po yung mga deprioritize sometimes, no? Mas priority yung mga infrastructure program, mga budget for DPWH, na-experience ko din po yan at nag-question din po ako. Kailangan po talaga tinatayuan natin ng mga issues na hindi priority. Pero priority po dahil sila yung kaya po nag-exist ang gobyerno ay para sa social at basic services. Eh kung wala po yan, bakit po tayo may gobyerno? So my experience as a woman leader taught me that advocating for women's representation and participation in the politics of the Bangsamoro and its governance is fraught with so many challenges: cultural, economic, security, and social barriers. These are everyday realities that women face, especially in a region that is emerging from war, transition from conflict to post-conflict. However, there is hope because I have personally witnessed that if we can collectively, men and women, harness our voices and join together, this can lead to achievements in policy and governance reform. So, what is my call to action? Your votes are our key to unlock women's voices in the Bangsamoro elections, driving equitable development and lasting peace. Let us vote for inclusive governance, support women candidates, and along the way demand political party reforms and educate others on women's role in governance and leadership. As someone like me who has walked this path, I know that it is not easy, but the work has to be done. As we say, there is no peace without women. There's no justice without women. So with that, I leave you with a wonderful Juma Mubarak or Happy Friday, everyone. Friday is a very holy day for us Muslim. And wasalam, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Attorney Maysara. There's no peace without women. There's no justice without women. And it's a very in-depth discussion on how we can definitely develop an inclusive society where women are recognized, women's rights are promoted, and women are part and parcel of the development of. So let me now move to our next topic as we dig deeper into the stories Moro people. And I think it's important for our participants, guests, to understand further the various aspects through stories, lived stories, which will be shared by our next lecturer expert. So, as I introduce her, let me read her bio note. To talk about beyond flood control, stories of displacement, we have Samira Gutok, who was a Shimning Fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies in 2003. She was a former armed legislator and commissioner of the Bangsamoro Transition Commission, civic and youth leader, speaker, journalist, and women's rights and peace advocate. She also served as member of the Philippine Army Multi-Sectoral Advisory Board. She helped organize the Ranao Rescue Team, a volunteer group set up in response to the humanitarian crisis that ensued after the Marawi siege in 2017, and spoke in Congress about human rights abuses during martial law in Marawi. As spokesperson of the Ranao Rescue Group team, which is assisting in government and survivor families of missing and dead persons from the siege, she was recently awarded by the United Nations Development Program Peace Awards 2018 as a community organizer in Marawi City. In the previous administration, Samira was appointed as a sectoral representative for women in the Assembly. As a legislator, she authored the Enhanced Education Act in ARM and has pushed for advocacies on declaring schools as a zone of peace, open government, civil society, and stakeholder collaboration, among others. As a journalist, Samira's worked as a correspondent for the Philippine Daily Inquirer, featuring Marawi City and Muslim communities all over the. She also worked with an award-winning group led by director Marilo Abaya and our scriptwriter, national artist Ricky Lee, to conceptualize the trailblazing movie Bagong Buwan. It has reaped accolades in film festivals abroad in New York, Japan, and Asia. She's reported on the situation of Muslims in Kulyat, Tandang Sora for an Al Jazeera contracted outfit and spoke on BBC on the issue of minorities facing globalization. She also served as a former editor of the Moro Times or by Manila Times and was EIC or editor-in-chief of the MSU Mindanao Varsitarian. She tapped Trimedia to advocate for cultural minorities, peace, human rights, intercultural understanding. Let's also note, mahaba yung kanyang bio note, she was also a recipient of the 10 Outstanding Young Men for Sociocultural and Youth Development by the JCI Philippines, 10 Outstanding Women in Nations Service or Towns in 2019, and Glory Awards by the UP College of Mass Communication. She obtained her degrees in journalism and masters in international studies at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and finished her law degree at the Aureliani School of Law. She was also achieving scholar at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. Um, she's also married to engineer Abdul Tamawis and has a 10-year-old son. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear participants, let's now welcome Samira Gutok.
Magandang umaga, Ron. Is my audio okay?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you properly. Yes.
Hi mga ka-AU, ka-AUSL, ka-Chievnings, ka-schoolmates all over, and the wonderful attendants and speakers, mga kasama sa BTC, my best friend, my Sarah Asnin, my co-UP Muslims, my president, Ma'am Irene, thank you for this moment in time na share ko sana kay Nathan muna as a moment of silence and prayer to see the Cebu displacement. Please, our video, ma'am, sir, by News 5.
My trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the water. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the water. Spirit, lead me.
Thank you, Nathan. May I invite everyone to pray for all those who died and their families as they undergo the worst moment of their lives. One of the highest earthquake moments in my province of Lanao del Sur was in the municipality of Maysara, where the mosque and its head, yung sa top ng mosque, yun na lang nakikita sa tubig. So, in displacement, from war and climate change or our weather, it's everyone who is affected, not just those who lost homes. And every one of us who has a Cebuano, Visayan relative would understand the gravity of how today, as the whole weeks will come, we are affected economically, even politically. So the slides that I show today, is a reflection of our story as a Filipino who has undergone hundreds of years of conflict and hundreds of years of climate weather problems as well because of our being archipelago and not being able to review all my environmental notes, but going back to my core as a Marawi and internally displaced persons leader in our country for Ako Bakwit. I recall that during martial law, which then was imposed on us in Marawi City, this policy by then President Duterte aggravated actually the situation of already being one of the poorest parts of our countries here, two, sila po ay hindi pa politically engaged and politically participant. Transitory pa nga ang Bangsamoro right now to have an election na hindi matutuloy next week, October 13, diba po? It's 2 weeks to come. And so many more. We call it women multiple burden. Multiple burden, pag may makita ka po, moms, sir, dyan sa marketplace nyo, dyan sa Capo, where in Pampanga, you see them in the markets, na mga Badjaw man yan, Maranao man yan, Maguindanao man yan, hindi taga sa inyo, this is because they had to flee from both even typhoon, climate change, from war, from family feuds because of one of the top 5 reasons for displacement or for redo, I'm sorry, is family feuds. not just political rivalries. So, actually, one point in time, talagang hindi demokrasya po ang ating bansa. It was by appointment, not election. Ang sultanate system, which our Muslim governance is about, it is about appointment, not election. So we're talking about voters' education, no? Is it sometimes election that really solves when kami mga election watchdogs in the past, one vote, 5,000 pesos po. Yes, we are being recorded and I'm not afraid to say it out loud. 5,000 pesos, one vote for a community that is already poorest part of our country. How can you recover that money as a politician? How can you run in an election this way? Paano po iyan, ma'am, in a voters education setting na kailangan pang iset up ang satellites, Wi-Fi, internet access, ma'am. As we speak, natatakot ako kanina mawawala yung internet ko because I'm here beside Marawi and alongside near the Marawi area at minsan pawala-wala po yung aming Wi-Fi. So, ang guiding framework po natin po when it comes to displacement is the United Nations Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement. So, Google na lang po ninyo yan. Hindi ko po naipapakita sa inyo kasi nga, pag third speaker, alam ko na po, yung inyong attention span, mababa na po. Importante po ay i-Google nyo po. I-Google, scrollable naman po yan, Googleable po, ang ating mga batas para proteksyonan. And behold, among all na mga senador, it's Lito Lapid sa 20th Congress na nag-file ng Internally Displaced Persons Bill. Aside from Senator Lauren Legarda, I haven't checked kung na-refile niya, pero pag Google ko ngayon, it's Senator Lito Lapid na nag-file ng Internally Displaced Persons. 2017, ang kwento ko po. Ang kwento ko po, nagserbisyo po ako sa gobyerno bilang isang commissioner na mag-draft ng Bangsamoro Law. At kasama po ako ni Asnin, namatay po yung inaama ko dyan, na former chairperson, si Gazal Jaafar and Gazali. So, 2017, that May, 20 plus, 21 ba yun? Nasa Zamboanga City po kami at nagda-draft or mag-popularize, i-consult na po yung draft namin po na Bangsamoro Organic Law ni Namay Sara. At tinanong po ako at midnight, almost 10 o'clock I think, at that closed door meeting, 3 babae lang po kami na commissioners, kaya you will always feel no in a setting, bakit ikaw lang yung babae, konti lang ang babae. Lahat lalaki, mga elders ng MILF, siyempre mga commissioners, lahat po sila, government appointed, MILF government panel. And I was asked, at I think at the back of my mind, narinig ko na may nangyayari, and I parang hindi ko naririnig yung nangyayaring. I didn't want to believe that a siege was going to happen, and a siege was happening at that moment, May 21, in Marawi, that corner where my house is located in Basak-Madatlat Highway, National Highway, that Samira, uuwi ka na ba? 3 letra po, that 3 words, uuwi ka na ba? Paano ko kaya uuwi? Naisip ko, may mga ano na po, putukan na po . Yung aking mother was in that house in Basak-Madatlat, Bangon Street. Nandoon yung aking anak na 3 years old pa lang, si Amir. Nandoon yung mga kasama sa bahay. Sila lang po. At hindi ko alam kung may sasakyan sila if they had to leave Marawi to go to Iligan. So yung mga ganong natataranta ka na, yung parang feeling kalma pa ako kasi syempre government position ako. Tapos yung chairperson of the Bangsamoro Commission was asking me, it's okay for you to leave kasi we're talking about the draft, di ba po? And it's Marawi. Ako yung affected sa lahat ng commissioners. Ako yung taga Marawi and my mother. So sabi ko po, syempre po, I have to go. Syempre, as calm as I could. So I went outside, parang slowly but quickly. Hindi ko po maalala. Pero I think tumakbo na yata ako sa sasakyan. And as fast as I could, 12 hours ang travel po from Zamboanga to Iligan kasi hindi na pwede pumasok na Marawi. While the phone was ringing, I don't know kung nakaano pa yung cellphone ko, okay, fully charged, pero I think I was calling my mother and my doktora na sister, taga Cagayan Valley, taga Ilocano, sister-in-law ko, kumusta ka? And literally, I remember the memory was that I think she was down on her knees on a floor sa hospital at natatakot siya kasi pinapasukan niya yung kanilang hospital ng mga yung group na yon, na sila po sa hospital yung first target kasi may mga injuries na sa kanilang mga colleagues doon sa grupo na yon, having confronted yung PNP at saka sila yung multi group doon sa Masak Madatlet. Literally, next to us, our street, is the location ng Basak Madatlet, where there was fighting because nag-serve ng warrant itong si PNP sa kay Isnaj, yung terror leader. Then he was there in that location because of a big assembly ng tablig. It's called tablig. Kuruj sila there and in assembly, spiritual assembly. At that moment, nung paglabasan na sila, siyempre dinepensa ng mga kasama niya, yung si Hapilon, and then yung PNP, siyempre, they were serving the warrant, then nagka-exchange ng fire, and that led to the whole, putukan, exchange of fire in that very public highway at about 12 p.m. And then towards, sunod-sunod na po, nag-take over yung young men na Maute into the ambulance. They took over a fire truck. They went into the hospital to bring their injured colleagues. Parang nag-ano na sila, nag-react na, nagwawala na po sila. And then the police and the military already were alerted to close cordon or cover they're not watching a movie. Pero ito po yung memories na pero hindi ko to nakikita, but I was in Iligan, traveling already to Iligan, which is the nearby of Marawi, to help coordinate the departure of my family and of course others. And then when we arrived in Iligan, thankfully 4 of us na may mga kasamang mga rescue-minded volunteers, no? Like we each had to be a Red Cross on our own. We all had our families to rescue. We had our own groups. We had already our support systems sa civil society. And there was Director Tarhata Sumayan of TESDA. There was 4 of us who met. Attorney Kali Gansano, Ding Kali, and we tried through connections ng each one of us kasi kahit papaano, we could connect to our cabinet secretaries sa Malacanang because each one is a civil leader who was always advocating for policy. So our target was to really reach the CABSEC, to reach President Duterte, who was abroad then. And he was decided on martial law na sana po just so that mai-rescue, mailabas yung mga thousands of households outside of Marawi who are inside their houses while nagbabarilan na, ay mailabas po. So we had volunteer cars, mga 3 na yon, and then we volunteered as women to sit in front so that in case the Maute group, ayaw na nila kasi makakita ng any person na government, kami po yung babae na frontliners para lang maka-help assist na makapasok yung mga tao, warm bodies, people who needed to leave Marawi because that's what really literally happened. Nagkaroon ng massive exodus, people jumping on an armak, people climbing on anything na sasakyan, makisakay sa hindi niya kamag-anak para lang maka-leave ng Marawi City, May 2017. So that was the chaos. That was the longest walk for our families. My mother was able to ride a sasakyan. Yung mga kasama niya, they also find sasakyan. Hindi pwede, nagsikipan na sa bawat isa. In fact po, ang image na maalala ko po na kwento is that among all the lakaran ng 5 hours, 6 hours, towards 10 hours na naglalakad ka ng malayo, ay that may naglalabasan na yung bayanihan, naglalabasan na po sila ng tubig para po mapainom yung mga tao na naglalakad ng malayo. At meron din pong the pregnant woman who gave birth in a car sa tindi ng traffic po. Ang tagal-tagal po. 10 hours kasi nga, ang tagal ng lakad, ang tagal ng paghihintay, stand still yung mga traffic. Lahat ng mga sasakyan na imagine mo, nag-aalisan na sa Marawi City. Of course, there was no announcement, public announcement na megaphone, sound. So yun ang mga suggestions nga namin as volunteers na ng rescue na sana meron pong emergency call, parang earthquake na drill na parang everyone should go here, everyone should depart, leave. Pero kasi even government officials, even government officers from the capital, from the city hall, they also had to protect the boundaries nila po ng kanilang city hall capital so that hindi ma-attack nitong mga young armed men. Yes, an emphasis on young. They were young. They were angry at the government. They were angry at non-Muslims because of their feeling that ito nga naaalis yung pagiging Islamic ng Marawi City. Their conception was that they had to bring back Islamic to the city that was secularizing itself with all these tarpaulins that were celebrating mga feeling nila masyadong mga mababaw. You know, paging yung mga mukha ng tao, puros nasa streets, celebrating and women in makeup and all that. Yun ang mga ganilang conception. So, the DSWD, we got this information. Can you imagine gaano karami? I got to present po in Ukraine, I forgot, sa dami ng seminars, Washington. Ito, almost I think Ukraine, near Ukraine, nag-present po ako, itong mga slides na ilan. In this country of the Philippines where already we have suffered 600 years conflict, tapos ito na naman, martial law 1970s, tapos a repeat in Marawi 2000 na, ay napakarami pong naalis sa bahay. And to this day, 2025 po, umiiyak ang mga ilang IDPs dyan sa Senado where I work now, na still they have to find support in terms of food, etc. So, pare-pareho lang naman po when it comes to flooding typhoon, pare-pareho pong nasa lapag na po tayo niyan. Where do we go? Do we go to schools? We go to public spaces, maghahanap ng shelter. Pero as you see, it's transitory. It's transitory. So, ang imagine natin na polisiya sana is that when displacement comes, when earthquakes come, when wars come, kailangan po ready na po ang bawat household na meron silang where basement ba sila pupunta for protection, basement friendly. Are we aware of how to build our houses na protection sa ating sarili? Are we protected? So there's no engineering set up in my mind yet on how it looks, but our households have to be ready, being a Pacific Ring of Fire country. So ito po, can you imagine living here for 6 months? In a forum, ang kausap ko na tatay, sabi niya, kinakati na masyado yung likod ko, Sam, kasi sardinas namin 3 buwan na, di ba? Sardinas kasi, syempre, ayuda yun natin. Thank you to ayuda. Pero sardinas ang kinakain nila. Sino ba sa inyo may allergy sa tuna? Ako rin may allergy ko. Mas lalo pa yung mga matatanda, sensitibo. So talagang pinakita niya yung likod niya. And binler ko ito kasi the daily stories, ma'am, dahil naka-set up yung 4 na volunteers kaming 4, na bigla na lang ang dami na nag-volunteer, kanya-kanya, sina May Sara, huge evening, were able to donate to us 100,000 or so to give out to food packs. It's a daily, no? How many people would come around and yung mga volunteers would distribute to evacuation centers in Iligan, Baluin, nearby Lanao Norte. Hindi mo syempre ma-reach. And United Nations finally recognized during that moment, may mga home-based shelters, home-based IDPs, because the culture ng mga iba sa amin, sa Maranao, na nahihiya kami sa evacuation sites kasi nakakahiya nga. Nakakahiya for people with so-called royal lineage, whatever, yung mga conception na pipila. So, nasa bahay sila, doon sila dideliveran ng food packs. Then it was happening. So we had partners. You were our partner. The United Nations international NGO community set up offices here. So the 4 categories of, if I remember, WASH, that's 4 letters, WASH. Yan ang 4 categories of intervention ng international, national agencies. 1, water. Very important po yung access to water, syempre. And sanitation health. So ito po, human rights concern naman, if there's military in this group chat or PNP nasa Zoom natin ngayon, mahina po. Mahina talaga po yung isang internally displaced person na magpa-file pa ng kaso na bakit po napasukan ng mosque ng stray bullet. Kasi nga nag-aanuan, di ba? Nagpuputukan sila for 6 months in the Marawi location. So ito po, may bata just in a mosque. Ito yung mga hindi naalabas ng Marawi. At na stray bullet siya. Sniper. Sniper or stray bullet. Sometimes po, pasensya na po, the memories are sometimes, we want to bury them but we can't. And these are things na we have to remember because our seminar wants us to remember. We have to remember so that justice can be attained. And the cemeteries was one important advocacy na ngayon namin sa Senate with, of course, Senator Robin pushing for a public cemetery access bill. And it wasn't signed by President BBM, FYI. But the cemetery at 2017, 8 years ago, in 2017, was very critical because where would you put the body po? After, syempre, imbestigahan, ipo-forensic yan ng mga gobyerno, after which saan po pupunta. And even the debate na 24 hours po dapat i-bury yung Islamic burial na Muslim cadaver, yan po debate kasi wala pang framework walang guiding framework at that time. So ngayon lang yung may Islamic Burial Act na tayo na again authored by Senator Robin. So ito, yung mga stories na ito, were very common. Dumarating po sila sa, again, nag-volunteer po through Secretary of TESDA Mamundyong, yung office nila sa Iligan, naging temporary rescue natin, RRT, Rana Rescue team. We called ourselves the volunteers, and this is a story of a young guy who was taken, kasi nga, hindi alam kung sinong terrorist or not at that moment in time. Naglalakad ka lang, na hindi ka nagpa-rescue na punta sa Iligan, at lalaki ka, hindi ka alam kung terrorist ka or not by the authorities. So, a guy was brought to authority, and ito yung nangyari daw sa kanya, nag-report sa amin. So, ito po, ito na, yung kanyang kamay, this was a, product of a torture. And ito rin po, mga deaths po, that, next please. So, hanggang ngayon, 8 years later, yes, our chairperson, we celebrate her, Marawi Compensation Board, former chairman, was able to facilitate funding. Kasi nga po, yun ang problema. The billions needed to award tens of thousands of people who lost homes in Ground Zero, covering several dozens of barangays. So, hanggang ngayon, next please, they would still be wanting to claim their financial claim for their residences to be rebuilt. Hanggang ngayon po, 8 years later, 1,000 days later plus, hindi pa po na activate or na liven, na tauhan, na lagyan ng tao ang Ground Zero. To what reason? Yes, there are schools built. There is the police or the barangay halls held built. Kaya lang po, it's never the same. Pag wala po yung kamag-anak mong katabi mo, napunta na ng Luzon, napunta na ng abroad, hindi mo katabi, hindi mo nakasama, parang hindi mo na gustong bumalik. Aside from financial claims mo na hinihintay mo. So, ito po ang mga nawala during the siege, sa kaguluhan, sa chaos. Families were divided. They didn't get to find each other. There was a woman who lost 3 children. And I don't know what happened na to her, Ma'am Lumabaw. So this is our annual State of the Nation, my State of the Nation address, my State of the Bakwit address. Nag-uusap-usap ang mga bakwit, minsan binabantay ng pulis. Pati ba naman yung freedom of expression, minsan binabantayan. Yes, dyan sa Marawi. And these are the imams who were advocating for return to Marawi, ASAP. Return, no to airstrikes, all kinds of artilleries, all kinds of military men, pati Navy, I think they came, all the army branches, AFP branches, for a small city of Marawi. And we're not just talking of kaya 500,000 displaced, because Marawi City, Lanao, buo. Kaya when you had to travel, kasi hindi ka umalis ng Lanao, and you go through Marawi, from Lanao, municipalities, katabi ng Marawi, you had to travel around. So they take 12 hours to go to a supposed 1 hour lang travel for Iligan City Sanctuary or Rescue or Grocery. Kasi doon lang nag-activate lahat sa Iligan City, where you had Wi-Fi, where you had medicine, where you had So Iligan City really had to accommodate what the remnant, everyone na alis sa Marawi. So we were advocating, dinadaanan po yung rescue team kasi nga Iligan, highway lang naman yung rescue. So we were a normal stopover of all these media stations. After they've interviewed government, dadaan po sila sa amin ng mga rescue civil society leaders para sa interviews because non-entry na nga talaga ang Marawi City except mga sundalo, except gobyerno, na iilan din. So talagang no man's land, naging no man's land that during that time of 2017, May to October, until so-called liberation. Until even after October, wala nang buwabalik kasi nga nasira na yung bahay nila. And so these were some of your donations. This is Dr. Maysara. Until today, I have to face hospital emergencies by the day. Kasi that's the life we lead, di ba po? As chiefnings, we have to be responding to the realities of our times. And so IDP rights continue to be unlegislated. Yes, there are conventions of human rights. There are the claims board has been set up, Barawi Claims Board, after several years, which needs still funding. They need structural engineers. They have been given so to help assess all the damage and the claim. But to this day, 8 years later, still thousands of us, thousands of our colleagues na Marawi, Maranao IDPs and non-Maranao IDPs who need claims from there. Kasi nga Marawi is a melting pot for students of Mindanao, non-Muslim, Muslim, Christian, at that Luma, they're all here in Marawi studying, and some of them also lost family. So this is not just a Marawi story. This is a Filipino story. This is a Mindanao story where war and in conflict and in climate change typhoons, nobody ever wins this story because the impact to body, the impact to spirit, the impact to heart, mind, body, physical, lahat po yan apektado. And so what are the proposals? My story is about the stories itself. Legislation policy follows. It's a government intervention. I'm here as a civilian wanting to tell the story of my community. And as chiefnings, you have responded, financial donation, but to tell you this still, so many of the IDPs who continue to claim, to continue to want food, medicine. And so we look at Cebu now, and we look at other typhoons struck in Masbate, Bicol, but Lanao, Marawi, and the Bangsamoro continues to need help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir. Thank you. That's a very heartfelt message. In war, there are no winners. Maraming salamat. I think, I really hope that the participants, some of the lessons we share, especially the some sense of history. Kadalasan kasi we really forget the historical part, the struggles that they are facing, can connect to the youth that we usually hear, or the people on the ground who really feel the challenges and the devastation of the war. So maraming salamat, Samira. And we now move to our next speaker. And not last but not the least, definitely, to talk about how we can rethink strategies on voters' education. We have by Shaima Baragir, Sam, as we call her, is an independent researcher and conflict resolution specialist working along the intersections of anthropology, conflict, and development. She has worked as a consultant and expert in international organizations and government institutions in leading high-level program evaluations, drafting legislative reports, facilitating multi-stakeholder strategic dialogues, and providing strategic guidance on governance development initiatives in the Bangsamoro region. Beyond Bond, Bang served as an evaluation consultant for a peace project in Myanmar and a peace building facilitator in Deep South Thailand. She did her shielding at the University of Bradford, where she received her Master's of Arts degree in conflict resolution with distinction. She currently serves as a key expert of the EU ACID Subatra Justice and Society Project. My dear participants, let's now welcome Bam Baragi.
Hello, Ron. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to share my screen, so give me a moment. I also hope that I am audible, so okay lang po ba? Naririnig naman?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Hang on. Okay, and I will turn off my video just in case so you don't get distracted. Okay, good morning, everybody. So I will be discussing while talking about rethinking strategies on on voter education. I hope that I wouldn't go past the 20 minute allocation, but just in case. Okay, so hang on. The flood control issue is the most pressing issue, sorry, that we are facing right now in our country. And then 2 days ago, we had this earthquake in Cebu, and social media was littered with photos of substandard infrastructure getting exposed. This is a topic that has captured the attention of practically the entire nation. We see it in social media in particular. But before we go into detail on that, I want you to look at the collection of pictures. So these are photos that were taken during the September 21 rallies. These are photos from Manila, Cebu, and Negros. And there are two things that I noticed that are common in these photos. So there's class demographics and principle-based messaging. While the flood control fund issue has been criticized across all classes, the middle class, demographically speaking, constitutes a significant portion of the most vocal populace. And we see this apparent in online platforms, no, over social media, and in the collective action leading to the protests. And the logic follows, because considering that the middle class bears the brunt of taxation, it just makes sense for them to act and react that way. A paper published by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or the PIDS, in 2022 actually states that the middle class, encompassing the lower middle, the middle, and the upper middle, account for 63.62% of tax collections. And the flagrant misuse of taxes at the expense of the average Filipino, as manifested by the subpar service delivery, is that made worse by the vulgar display of luxury by public officials and their corrupt ilk. And then the second noticeable thing common across all of these photos are the recurrence of the lines or the words magnanakaw, kawatan, that's the Cebuano, and I believe like the Hiligaynon word for thief as well. So it's quite telling that the messaging remains rooted in value judgment. And while this may be an effective way of framing the issue in a manner that spurs collective rage, it risks blurring the lines of accountability by situating the issue as a moral concern. And while morality is a value that most people still aspire to, it remains an abstract concept that is difficult to measure. And by extension, the vagueness provides leeway for forms of atonement that merely absolve the perpetrators instead of actually resolving the problem. Equating government corruption to mere thievery diminishes the weight of the act and its tangible causality to our quality of life. Framing it that way resolves the need for vigilance because thievery can be fixed with discretion. Diba? Let's say had the Nepo babies fought their primal urge to show off in social media, or that no flood happened, or no whistleblowers opened this can of worms, would we be just as angry as we are, or aware of the corruption happening behind closed doors? Which now begs the question, no? Are we truly against corruption, or are we just against blatant corruption? And I will leave this slide for a while so you can reflect on it. And I will leave this here because I know that at some point in our lives, no, we have heard the following statements. Pare-pareho lang naman lahat ng politiko, kahit sino naman nakaupo dyan, wala rin namang magbabago. Pick the lesser evil na lang talaga. And the thing that I hear most among my circle of friends, and I admit I've also said it a couple of times, kapagod na, alis na lang tayo ng Pilipinas. So these statements are common statements. Some might be said in jest, but this is not rare. And that's because this is the cycle of emotions in the Philippines: anger, then frustration, and then indifference, and then apathy. Philippines has been branded as one of the oldest democracies in Asia. and want to have the most vibrant civil society in the region. We've been protesting and resisting, either militantly or peacefully, from the times of the Katipunan to the People Power Revolution. There's EDSA 1, EDSA 2, and the many protests in between that we do all year long. We've been struggling and fighting and praying in solidarity, and it has reached a point where it just keeps repeating. So our emotion, from anger, frustration, indifference, and then apathy. And if there is another major trigger, we will get angry again. And then we will get frustrated again. And then we're indifferent again. Paulit-ulit. We get used to it. And then we wait for a specific stimuli that will compel us to take action. And then nothing happens afterwards. Of course, there had been attempts to break the cycle. And one might even say that, election is our chance, no? Our one and only chance. And this leads me to the topic of voters' education. So voter ed, as defined, is providing potential for voters with the necessary information to make an informed choice in the voting booth. But with this definition, there is an assumption here that polling booths are universally sacred and impartial. But the reality, as we all know, is depressing. It is disheartening, but Philippines is a place where electoral process holds little to no political value in terms of the Filipino people's participation in the political process. Ideally, the idea of a representative democracy is for the people to elect a representative that will put forward their demands, diba? But the reality in Philippine politics speaks otherwise. Historically, the people's participation ends as soon as elections are over. Meaningful contacts with politicians ends, and the entire electoral process merely serves as a tool to legitimize power granted to political elites. And as a result, seeking accountability for failed policies require going through the bureaucratic process set in place by institutions that are in the hands of these corrupt officials and are used to repress the rights of the people that it is supposed to uphold. And in many parts of the country, the voting booth is a place where people die. Simply going there is a risk to your life. Last week, I actually had a meeting with a friend who had experienced being an election lawyer and observer in several elections here in our region. And we compared our observations and experiences, and we agreed that voting is not a monolithic experience. It is different for each barangay, it's different for each municipality. And if I were to share a personal experience, during the national elections this year, I cast my vote in my hometown, Cotabato City. I woke up at 6:01 a.m. And then I went to the precinct at 6:15, cast my vote at 6:51, and then I left the premises at 7:02. I remember the time kasi tinatext ko yung pamilya ko while I'm doing this. 20 kilometers away in a barangay in Dinaig, Maguindanao, my cousins, the ones na kausap ko by that time, also woke up at 6 a.m., went to the precinct at 6:30, waited for the ballots to arrive until 1 in the afternoon, got harassed by so-called watchers at 3 p.m. and then they have to search for their names, which were strangely not on the voters list posted on the precinct, even though the COMELEC website indicated otherwise. They managed to cast their votes at 10 p.m. and then they went home at 2 a.m. because they have to stay behind and stand guard to make sure that the voting machines get transported safely from their precinct. A friend in another province informed me that she and her family were not able to vote as they heard that there had been a violent altercation at their polling precinct and that someone had been shot dead. So the situation is different all over the country. And beyond these nuances in election contexts, much has to be done in improving our behavior toward democracy in general. The cycle of negative emotions that I mentioned earlier keeps recurring because we vote for the same people over and over again. And when I say we, I mean we collectively as Filipinos. Like at the end of the day, our individual votes do not excuse us from being affected by policies placed by people we did not vote for. And so it is necessary that to rise from the ashes of our political mistakes, we must collectively mature as a constituency, like as a nation. And this maturity does not manifest only within the realm of, quote, choosing the best candidate. It also includes our ability to respond maturely, may it be to political concerns or to the very results of our collective political decision. And it is in this manner that we need to change our behavior. Going back to the statements I've shared earlier, reflect on whether you or someone you know have expressed these thoughts or statements at some point in their life. It goes without saying that this is what constricts our political growth. It implies that we start with our baseline being negative right away, that everything is going to be horrible unless it wouldn't. And so when we see someone with promise, we all rush towards it. And while it is inspiring and good that we are able to discern that there are these types of public servants or politicians or even ordinary people, this still feeds into a culture of personality politics. And this has to change. Not all people working in the government are inherently corrupt. There are people with integrity, and there are people who try their best to be decent. And it is disrespectful to these people that we assume that they are corrupt by default simply because they are part of the political structure. This is also disrespectful to ourselves because we subconsciously set ourselves up for failure. How can we anticipate a country like our nation to thrive if we start off so disillusioned and we are simply waiting for someone to change that? And while behavioral change remain an individual and personal endeavor at its very core, there now exist approaches that seek to improve adoption of positive changes on a collective level. So social and behavioral change, this I probably shouldn't have capitalized each, no? It's not a actual proper noun, but there is actually an approach now called social and behavior change, or SBC, which is an innovative way of problem solving. And it's at its very core, it understands the importance of the environment or the context in explaining how or why people behave or think. And this leads me to our case in the Bangsamoro. Now, the speakers before me had provided the brief history of the BARM, so I wouldn't elaborate into that. But this area now, known as the Bangsamoro, prior to the establishment of the Philippine Republic, is a hybrid of a monarchical and quasi-feudal system. There was the sultanates, and then the local communities were led by the datu, or the chief. So mostly male, and if it's a woman, they call him bai. And I say quasi-feudal because it is closest to the Western notion of feudalism, but they're not exactly the same. One key difference is that the Western feudal system is primarily land-centered. But in the Moro and indigenous areas, land is not a property that is, it's not a sole property of an individual or a family. It was communal, and in a community there is a leader. So the dude looks very Western, but just pretend that that it doesn't look like that. So ito yung datu, as we usually call it. And in a community, so there's the leader, no? There's the chieftain, the datu, and the usual structure is that, for instance, whatever the harvest, the yield of the ordinary person, that will be brought to the chief. And then think of the datu as a wealth manager. So if someone dies, they will get married, or if someone gets sick, they go to the datu. They ask for help because he manages the community's resources. That is how it was prior to the establishment of the Philippine Republic. Now, with the creation of the advent of the Republic of the Philippines, these local community structures were absorbed into the Philippine political structure on paper and on the table, but the perception of the key remained the same. In some cases, the incumbent datu had been appointed as mayor or governor, and in some areas, there were new people, not from the nobility, but they were appointed by the national government. And what resulted is one of the biggest hurdles we have in the Bangsamoro. It's making people understand democracy. And primarily because it did not naturally emerge from the people. It was imposed. It came with a template. This is now the Philippine Republic, and the new little community in Barira, Maguindanao, you are now a constituency. The gerrymandering messed up society so bad, municipalities are carved from old settlements. Now imagine yourself as a local, no? In, say, the old town of Dulawan. And then your sister lives 5 kilometers away. And then suddenly, at some point in your life, you see signposts saying that the name of your town has changed from Dulawan into Datupiang, and your sister, who used to be, part of living in Old Dulawan, like you at Dulawanon, is now a constituent of a different municipality. To some, such change did not come abruptly. Now imagine this time an older lady. Siguro let's call her Babu Munera. Excuse me. So imagine this older lady who has lived through several generations. In her youth, there was a datu in their area who helped when there are problems in the community. And then when the Philippine Republic was established, si Babu Monera, may pamilya na siya, at si Datu, mayor na rin. But they don't call him mayor. He's still addressed as Datu. And even up to now, there are still places where the locals cannot distinguish the difference between a mayor, a councilor, a board member, a barangay chairman, because they are all Datu in their eyes. And traditionally, because Datu is the wealth manager, he is logically perceived as affluent, mayaman. Now that Datu is a mayor and he is paid a salary, alam ba ni Babu yan? Kasi sa paningin niya, he is still Datu. And as Datus are by nature rich, it is therefore normal for Datu and his descendants to have 10 fortuners, 5 mansions, and all that. But for Babu to remain poor. Over my years of fieldwork, I have met locals who think this way. And they would even say, mabuti nga ngayon, hindi na kami nagbibigay ng ani namin. And so when Datu, now mayor or governor or whatever, gives them money every now and then, Datu is perceived as kind. He is not seen as if he is fulfilling a duty as a public official. What they see is that, mabait lang siya. So they would say, yun, kahit di ko na binibigyan ng harvest, mabait siya sa amin. And multiply this by the number of decades. This perspective that is so entrenched even up to now, there is no notion of accountability being demanded. And that's why local politicians continue to have free reign. And it's not because people want them to be there, but because that's what they're used to. It's difficult to grasp the concept of democracy because it's a concept that is foreign. Like, how do you even translate that in our language? And that's why simply telling people, oh, you just have to choose wisely, you have the right to choose, might not necessarily be effective. Because for them, traditionally, they never got to choose. In a point nga, di ba, ang pinakaunang mga mayor dyan. So the datos since then, and even now, sila pa rin yung nakaupo. And elections are just a facade. And this is not something that is particular to the Bangsamoro. This is common in many parts of the Philippines. Politicians can withdraw, reverse, or manipulate information even to create a situation that will affect public opinion. And as I've said earlier, the electoral process only legitimizes them being in the position. Context is different. And here, this hurdle that we have to overcome is especially more pressing right now here in the Bangsamoro as we continue to remain one of the poorest and most underdeveloped. So earlier, Attorney Irene stated in her opening remarks, voter education is not simply knowing how to vote, but also knowing who to vote for and who we are. I've looked at sample modules on voter education actually, and I've seen that one, while it is indeed very informative, it revolves in questions of what and how. Like, what is the political structure? What are its roles? How do you register? How do you vote? When do you vote? Stuff like that. But my question is, why is our understanding of voter education, why is it limited to a point that it only comes up during election season? And when we refer to a voter as someone who has the right to participate in an election by casting a vote, does that mean that it ends there? Are we just a voter during election? Are we not a voter now? Should I stop being a voter now? I mean, I'm still a voter. And so at this point, when I said in my title, we have to rethink it, it's a matter of seeing it beyond what it just stands like. So voter education must go beyond information dissemination on the local electoral process and must include a thorough understanding of democracy itself. If I may ask, well, you don't have to answer, but like, what is the average Filipino's first exposure to the electoral process? Yan, class elections, diba? As early as first grade, school children get their first taste of being a voter. They are asked to vote for the class president and then the vice president and so on. Usually, the president, if not the smartest child, is the one who the children perceive to be the most leader-like. Then the vice president is the assistant of the president. The secretary is the one with the prettiest penmanship. The treasurer is preferably the richest kid. The auditor is the person who ranks next to the treasurer, and then sergeant at arms are usually the burliest kids in the room, and then above all, the one wherein everyone is so excited to vote for, the muse, no? Because it's either the prettiest girl or the tomboy one as Jest. Could also probably explain why we are very interested in beauty pageants. And then they randomly appoint an escort. So this might not be the case in every classroom, and yours may be different, but in many places in the Philippines, it is like this. So most often, there is no explanation what the purpose of the elections are for. They're just there. Andyan lang, they have to be done. And so as we see it with children, this pattern of electing people to represent us, but it's not for them to do something good for us, but to represent us as someone who is good. You vote for your candidate who you think is the best. And the position is the prize. So wala na siyang kailangan gawin. Yun yung premyo niya. And because these people who get elected are what's seen as reflections or representations, there is the tendency to defend them, because to do otherwise is to admit that you chose wrong. And this is why loyalty to the person, or a politician in this case, happens because accountability was never considered a part of the equation to begin with. So and now we wonder, why is Philippine politics like this? So was there ever an opportunity to change or even to challenge these very things that were ingrained to us as children? Meron ba nun? Well, aside maybe from the usual, lessons in Philippine Constitution in university, I had one back then, and that was actually the only time that I was able to understand how politics, in general, the government, the structure and all that works. So imagine if I did not take up Philippine Constitution in university. And in many cases in the Philippines, there are a lot of our co-Filipinos or fellow who are not even able to reach university. So paano yun, 'di ba? Okay, so I think at this point you might ask, like, it seems that it's so entrenched in our culture. Does this mean that we accept it? Well, no, we need to understand that this is a wicked problem. It is complex and it takes time. And therefore, there is no quick fix or a one size fits all solution that is effective. However, every effort counts. Um, so I'm sharing like two stories where I have personally observed or the impact of being sincere with our efforts in encouraging behavior change. So one is a conversation with a cab driver, and the other is a conversation with an out of school youth. Oh, that's an OSY, from the Gen Z, from that generation. So the cab driver story is of a personal experience. It's in my city, and so the cab driver, he doesn't actually reside in my city. He lives in a neighboring municipality. This happened, I think, like 2 years ago, during the most recent elections, like prior to the one this year. So we were talking, and then the cab driver said that he is not a registered voter and he does not see the need for him to vote, because at the end of the day, tulad nung statements kanina, they're all the same, nothing's gonna change, and he doesn't see how that affects him. So he said it like that, wala namang epekto sa akin yan. I found that, of course, no, the initial reaction from me is that, uy, kuya, hindi ah. But then you don't do that right away. So I just like probed on and then asked about why he thought that way, and I found a loophole. Well, I found um like I found an instance where I could like engage. So I found out that he just had a kid, and they are like the main expenses of the family revolve around food and the needs of the baby. So I asked him, okay, kuya, so saan kayo bumibili ng gatas? At saan kayo bumibili ng diaper? And he said, no, he buys them either at the pharmacy or at the mall. Tapos, um, actually, at that point, uh, sabi ko sa kanya, Kuya, nakita niyo ba yung resibo? Nakita niyo ba yung VAT, value added tax? Even if the cab driver does not, you know, pay or hindi siya nagbabayad ng tax kasi he's indigent, you know, he's not just low income but he's technically poor, so he is exempted from paying taxes from, you know, the income tax, but he is still paying taxes. So I forgot the actual figures now, but then during that time, I took out my phone and then nag-calculator ako. I asked him how much he earns each day, how much does he spend for the needs of his baby. Tapos kinalculate namin. Tapos yung total namin, nasa, say, 600 a month ang nababawas just for the VAT. And 600 is like a big amount for him. So when I told him, Kuya, 600 every month para lamang sa gatas at diaper ng anak mo. That doesn't include the other things that you buy, the VAT that you unconsciously pay for when you refill your taxi, no, with sa gas station. So upon that realization, I saw it actually in from the rear view mirror, no, yung mata niya parang, ha, so nagbabayad din pala ako. Parang, of course, kuya, you are paying whether you like it or not, you are paying. And then we eventually, I remember, because this time I was doing research on the municipalities, and I said, do you know the internal revenue allotment of your municipality? So this is ERA, and now I think there's a new term for that, a national revenue allotment, if I'm not mistaken. So I asked him, and he didn't know, and I have to explain what the ERA is for. And I told him the ERA of their municipality is 364 million a year. And I told him, Kuya, that's a million a day. Ramdam mo ba? When you go to the barangay health center, are you does it even exist? 'Di ba? If nag-exist man siya, are you given medicine or meron bang nurse and all these things? So this was the conversation with him, and then eventually it came to a point where I myself also got quite emotional upon realizing that, you know, not only him but like me as well, ganito yung level ng for lack of a better word, no, ignorance, because it is ignorance. We do not know ng mga tao sa paligid. And after that conversation, I remember Kuya saying, alam mo, sabihin ko to sa mga kamag-anak ko. Like, yeah, you should. Parang, sige, ikalat natin. And it's, kasi that is also how I learned about it, when it hits me on a personal level. And the same is the case with this out of school youth, the OSY girl that I know. For context, so she's, I think, like around she's in her early 20s now, but when this happened, when the change happened, and it did not change overnight, it changed, the change happened over the course of 5 years. So this year she sent me a message during the months leading to the 2025 national elections. Sabi niya sa akin, ate, hindi pa tayo nakakapag-usap tungkol sa senatoriables. And I was so surprised because I never thought that she would say something like that. No, I mean, I knew that at that point she's already politically active and aware, but to a point where she insists on discussing about senatorial lineups and asking for my thoughts. That was one thing that I was not only impressed but curious about. Like, how did it get to this level? So I set up a meeting with her a few days ago, and then I asked her about how it unraveled. So tinanong ko siya, how did it happen? And she said, well, it started during the pandemic. Back then, she was like 18 already. And then, hindi siya a voter. She's not a registered voter. But during the pandemic, she lives in our city, by the way. The barangay where she lived in is part of the urban poor, and also like one of the barangays that well, aside from being the most like one of the most like underdeveloped, marami ding like social issues dun sa area na yon. And then she told me that during that time, what urged her to be more politically aware was when the like the local government's response to the COVID issue. So for her, one issue that she didn't like is how the curfews, our city had the longest lockdown. And her issue is that she cannot hang out with her friends anymore. And at first glance, you might think this is such a shallow thing to say, no? But this is someone from her generation at that time, no, at her age. This is what spoke to her the most. She cannot hang out with her friends. The rest of the country is slowly opening up, but we are still on a lockdown. And then the goods and the services that were provided due to the political issues in the city, the rivalry. So the aid does not reach her barangay. So she said, I'm going to go vote and I'm going to elect, and I'm going to change this person in power. That was her first, like, that was her awakening. And then I asked, how did it, transcend into national politics instead of just local politics? And she said it is through our conversations. So, and when I say our, like not just me, but with other people in the same like circle that I am, that she also constantly engages with. So sabi niya, when you were talking to us, and when you're talking to me in particular, when I had questions and you were there to answer it, and then you explained things clearly. So it was gradual from 2020, from the pandemic to now 2025, and these change that happened to her is not something that was forced. It was of her own awakening. And we see not only the fact that she's now politically active, but she also encourages her friends to do that. In the last national elections, I remember that she went up to us, to our circle, and then asked us if we have whether we have documentaries, so that she can have her friends join the group while we watch it, like documentaries on many issues about the country. So what does this say about this kind of what does this situation or this experience that I have say? I think it speaks to me. What I learned from it is that when it is contextualized, when it is personal, and when it is regular, the ability to actually change someone's perspective on something like such as the political process or democracy, it becomes more effective. And this is my challenge, not just for you, but also for myself, is how should we move forward beyond our usual understanding of, to quote, educating people, and not in a position wherein we educate because we know more, but for us as well to be educated of their experience, because it is different. We can not have like a one template and assume that just because it works for us, it works for everyone. It doesn't, and our history will tell you that it doesn't. And so yeah, at the end, for me, I think what I leave is that now it's just, this is in this way, if we consider that there are better ways to make democracy understandable for everyone in a way that it is not belittling, not harmful to oneself, but instead is practical and relevant. And we can do it not just as one person. We don't need to be not just as one person, but as a collective as well. But if that's difficult, we also do not need to be an institution. We can do it, one person at a time, because every vote counts, and we do not know to what extent does our influence or our impact on that person ends. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. Salamat.
Thank you very much, Bam. Very good points you raised on strategically, yes, shaping the voters' education, voters' mindset there in Bar. Now we proceed with, I think I guess, going beyond the time, but we'll be accepting some questions, but let me call in again to the screen, Attorney Maysara, Samira, and of course, Abby Kabsek, stream, so that we can quickly have a conversation on what was on the things that were presented uh, at this morning. So, Rodney, come to the screen. So let me quickly ask. So we still have speakers. Quickly for all of you, I think with the postponement of the elections, moving into probably March next year at the earliest, what do you think are the low-hanging fruits that we can take advantage of as we prepare, to prepare the people, prepare the electorate for the elections? Meaning, are there low-hanging fruits that can actually share the behavior, or do already low-hanging fruits that we can maximize so that the opportunity to run an election in March will definitely result to a better and inclusive Bangsamoro. Um, Asni, I mean, you might want to give your first opinion on this.
Thank you, Ron. I hope I was able to get the question clearly. But um, I think using the inputs from BAM and from the fellow speakers, the for the lack of better term, the new schedule will present an additional time for doing the voters' education. For example, as I've mentioned earlier, as of last year, the awareness is very low. And then if you want to contextualize because context determines everything, how the voters' education can be truly empowering in the case of the Bangsamoro, you will need extra time. So it's a mixed bag because as much as possible, we want to have it done even way before, but it is what it is. So the period that we have right now it presents us an opportunity to address that gap because we want a successful first parliamentary election. And one measure of success is that you have high voters turnout. And second to it, and probably more importantly, the people really understand what's the meaning of voting for a certain party and voting for a certain candidate. Because when we do a further analysis of the disinformation, for example, some of the disinformation are from the party themselves. By saying that if you vote for party A or if you vote for party B, it's as if you're voting for this to become a chief minister, which is not the case. So we the reason why we wanted and we fought for a parliamentary form of election is that we want to deviate from the personality politics. And yet we're still using, or they are still using, some of them are still using the very problem that we want to address. So it's not only a transition of the voting populace, but perhaps more importantly, it's also should be a transition of the candidates and the party themselves.
That's right.
And
No,
that period would hopefully be a period for such case.
right. No, but that is really good, Esteem. You have more time, additional time to do voters education. But Attorney Maysara, given this time frame, what should be the content, the substance of voters education to ensure that inclusion based on gender, for example, will definitely happen. You mentioned the representation in the parliament, for example, with of women has actually reduced. And is there a way in the next few months to make sure that by come March, we will have more representation from the women sector, for example? Attorney Maisara, I think your mic is off.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
yes. This is a very interesting question because the Bangsamoro Electoral Code has already been passed, and the quota that they required was 30%, the critical mass, according to research, to influence decision making in the parliament. However, there are other parties who exceeded that expectation of 30%, like Moro Ako, which in fact, no, 60% threshold, mas marami yung kababaihan na ninominate nila. I'd like to know the wisdom behind Moro Akos getting more women, no? But certainly for us women, that's good. But we have to look at how they arrange their nominees. Yung sabi ko kasi kanina, it's in the listing. Like, from 1 to 40, saan doon yung kababaihan? Kasi pag nag-submit ka ng list, like for example, lang nakuha mo lang ay 10% doon sa outcome ng vote, eh kung nasa baba yung kababaihan, nasa laylayan naman, hindi rin makukuha yung kababaihan at wala, baka kaunti lang yung makuha. Like sa 1 to 40, ang kababaihan doon nasa 20 to 40, 20, 21 to 40, no? So kailangan makita ng mga kababaihan at mga botante at maging transparent itong mga political party. Saan nyo ba nilagay ang mga kababaihang kandidato nyo? Anong numero sila napapaloob sa inyong listahan? So, very important na maging critical din tayo, mapanuri doon sa sinasubmit na listahan ng ating mga political party na claiming that they have complied with the 30% threshold. So isa yon na kailangan natin tingnan kasi naka-fix na yan eh. Hindi na natin mababago dahil nasa electoral code na 30%. However, siguro sa future kasi transition naman ang interim parliament, maaari namang mabago pa ang batas. Laws are not cast in stone, no? The parliament has plenary powers to always change in accordance with the demands of the time ang kanilang mga pinapasa ng mga batas. So, para sa akin, 30% is not enough. 50% parity, I think that's a good number. Kasi nakita natin na sa research, yun nga, yung 500 research studies na kinundak ng Global Leadership for Women, ang kababaihan kapag na-reach natin yung parity, mas gumaganda ang mga legislations na napoproduce ng mga congresses or parliaments dahil may diversity ng perspective. Hindi naman kababaihan lang, kundi iba pang gender, no? Hindi lang naman kababaihan, female in biological sense na sinasabi ko, mas maging inclusive ang mga parliament sa iba-ibang perspektibo. Mga lumads or indigenous people, kabataan, kasama yan, religious sector, kasi sa amin very strong na advocates din yan. So hindi kababaihan lamang. Pero para sa akin, kung ma-reach natin yung gender parity, maganda at maging mapanuri tayo sa susunod na halalan, ang dapat din nating i-focus din yung attention natin. Bakit ba tayo bumuboto ng mga miyembro natin sa parliament? At anong uri ba ng membro itong iboboto natin? Ano ang pinanggagalingan nila na advokasya? Tingnan natin kung ano yung track record nila, yung reputasyon sa community. Sila ba ay talagang meron ng solid na naglingkod? At kung wala naman, may potential ba na maging magagaling o sincero na mga future leaders ang ating tinitingnan? Whether kababaihan man o hindi, kailangan din natin tingnan ang kanilang mga nagawa na o gagawin pa sa parlamento. So sa voters education, tama, i-rethink nga naman natin dahil ang sabi ni Bam, inimpose daw ang demokrasya sa mga Bangsamoro, no? Pero meron tayo sa agama sa Islam na sinasabing demokrasya, yung ashura or consultation, at namimili tayo ng leader sa Islam in accordance with the wisdom of the group. So ibig sabihin, as early as the time of the prophet ay may demokrasya na, no? So hindi naman siya inimpose, hindi lang natin siya ginagawa bilang part ng cultural norms dahil sa sultanate, dahil meron tayong pinanggagalingan na dating monarkiya, no? Pero kung titingnan mo ang ating religion, ang itinuturo niya actually is mutual consultation and choosing a leader among the group. So parang demokrasya din yon in essence, kasi you are free to choose. So bigyan natin ng emphasis sa ating voters education yung religious side ng demokrasya, na tinuturo sa ating relihiyon na pumili ng leader na in accordance with the qualities na sinasabi doon sa ating banal na Quran. So siguro sa konteksto natin, bigyan natin yun ng emphasis. Not necessarily doon sa dating nakaraan na natin ng mga sultanate, which sa tingin ko, hindi naman nakasama yung sultanato natin dahil yan talaga yung kinagisnan natin. Pag-igihan na lang natin kung paano natin i-improve ang evolution ng political democracy in the Bangsamoro. Paano tayo mag-evolve as a people, paano natin may intindihan na ang gobyerno ay para sa tao, ang tao ang gobyerno. No? Hindi yung nakaupo ang gobyerno ay tao. Dahil maaring bawiin ng tao yung mandato kung hindi sila boboto. So, bigyan natin yan ng emphasis. Religious, cultural, social na mga aspeto sa voters education.
Salamat. But we're very interested, anyone or probably Bang, can we really get out of personality-based politics? And is it really bad to have personalities where you latch your character into their own values as well because they represent you, diba? So, kasi lagi naisip na, lagi pinag-uusapan na move away from personality-based. But sabi na natin, leadership should also be a mirror reflection of your own values. So, can you really get out of that behavior, that culture? Bam, ikaw, because we were talking about some of the strategies and behavior on voting.
Hello, thank you. Well, if I would answer it now, one is ideally and then realistically. Well, realistically, I think on an individual level, yes, we can. Siguro as a collective, yun yung mas challenging, no? Yung sabay-sabay na paglayo doon. On the question on whether it is really bad or like inherently bad, I would like frame it in a way wherein yung, as you've mentioned, no, the culture that we have, yung nakasanayan natin, wherein we see reflections of ourselves into like public servants or like officials and yung mga politicians that we vote. But on another hand as well, the culture of the Filipinos itself, even the Bangsamoro, di ba, malakas yung affinity sa atin eh. Kung kanino tayo nakaka-relate. And the dangers with that is it blurs the line, and especially it can be dangerous, no, when we seek for accountability. I actually believe that if we are to look up to certain personalities in politics, it's with a sense of discernment to see the policies beyond the person, to probably be able to highlight the if there are, I mean, I'm sure there are like the positive traits, yung ano yung nasa personality na positive, pero to not conflate it with the policies. Kasi we see it like how it has eventually resulted, no, to how we act, kung paano tayo ngayon, yun nga, as I've mentioned kanina, yung idolatry, minsan hesitant na i-call out yung politiko. Katulad ng sabi kanina ni Attorney Maysara, no, tao ang gobyerno, hindi kung sino lang yung nakaupo. Pero kung halimbawa masyadong malakas yung personality politics, the fact that you relate so much to a person and see it as an extension of yourself, that therefore any criticism towards that person is an attack on you personally, hindi tayo mag-evolve. Kasi hindi na kayang tingnan yung nuance between ano ba dapat yung trabaho. Because at the end of the day, the people that are currently in position, even public officials and public servants, government employees, it's still a job, no? Trabaho yon. And it's good if we do it with integrity. Not good. It should be done with integrity. It should be done passionately as well. But at the end of the day, kung yung trabaho mo nga ay hindi mo magawa ng mabuti, it's not like it ends there. Kasi ang impact nun sa community, sa society. So, I think there has to be like my certain kind of maturity when dealing with concepts such as this.
I have a question to all of you. Do you think you can honestly say at the moment that there is a shared vision, a shared dream among the Bangsamoro, given that the autonomy is given, the that you're charting your own path, your own path. Meron ba talagang shared dream na yun? Sinabi ni Kabsek Lasnin, di ba nga yung appreciation, voters turnout, nababa, I mean, there's more awareness that more awareness program that needs to be done. But meron ba? Klaro ba sa mga tao na there's a shared vision for all? Anyone can answer this. Bal, I mean, you want to sinabi.
Sige.
Asni, okay.
Sige, I'll go ahead. I think there is. Otherwise, we would not reach this far. And considering the experience, considering the long history, I can confidently say that there is a shared dream. The challenge now is how do we sustain that? Ito, just a quick anecdote. When we're doing the plebiscite in 2019, I came across, mabilis na kwento, matandang babae na. And I approached them, our team approached that lady. Apparently, she was already 100 years old. And it was her first time to participate in an electoral exercise. That was for the ratification of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. At yun ay maraming kwentong ganun sa region. Okay, so balikan natin, that's in her 100 years of existence, first time niyang bumoto. Kasi nga, for them, wala namang masyadong nababago kahit papalit-palit ng mga leaders before. But yung pag-ratify ng Bangsamoro Organic Law, it was the only vote worth casting for her. Right. So, ganun yung shared dream when we started the transition period. If I imagine myself going back to, di ko makalimutan si Babo Gindulungan Manakpa. Pag tinanong, kung sulit ba yung pagpila mo, sulit ba yung after 100 years na existence mo, hopefully she's still with us. Wala bang regrets dun sa pagboto ng yes? So, to answer again, the shared dream, the shared aspiration is there. Ang question now is it at the same level as before? And if not, then we need to perhaps reconsider and have a reflexivity and look inwards also, especially for us here who are part of the formal governance.
Thank you, Asni. Attorney Maysara.
I'd like to point out that shared dream was kind of shattered when Sulu voted no to the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So, it was very hard for me to accept na the very province that started, the resistance movement, because MNLF was born in Sulu, was the one who voted no. And they were the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao is a product of yung Sulu siege, no? In 1972. If you think of Marawi, you have to think of Sulu also in 1972. Nagkaroon sila ng matindi na siege dyan. And then the Jabida massacre also from the Sulu Tawi-Tawi people and Basila, no? So bakit umalis at nagsabi na hindi na kami sasama? Maybe we have to reflect also kung meron ba tayong pagkukulang sa ating mga kapwa Bangsamoro at hindi na sila nag-share ng dream. At maaari siguro natin bigyan ng pansin na ano ba ang na kailangan nating gawin para itong binuo natin na pangarap ay magkakasama tayo muli. Kasi dugo ang binigay dito ng mga tao, no? 120,000 people na naitalang patay. Bakit hindi nyo na gusto na kasama kami sa journey, no? So isa yan sa mga palaisipan para sa akin. Kung ano ang future ng autonomy? Kung merong palang isang napakalaki at napakalakas na grupo o tao, kasi I also call them Tausug people, no? They have their nation state. In fact, it preceded our sultanate kasi mas nauna silang naggobyerno. 1650 ay establish na nila yung gobyerno nila sa Sulu. At nagsabi sila na hindi na kami sasama at mag-join na kami sa national polity. Ano ang future ng autonomy? Ano ang shared aspiration ng mga people? But certainly, dito sa mga natira na mga Moro, gusto namin sanang isama pa sila sa journey, no? Pero hindi natin sila pwedeng pilitin dahil ang right to self-determination ay karapatan din nila na sabihin na hindi kami boboto at hindi kami sasama. Iyan ang isa sa naging parang heartbreak ko bilang isa sa mga commissioner na nagsulong ng batas para magkaroon tayo ng autonomiya. So ngayon, ang sinasabi natin, is there a shared aspiration? There is a definite shared aspiration to develop our autonomy, to develop our identity, to develop our region. Kasi nga, pasyak kami na gusto namin ng ganitong gobyerno para ma-preserve namin ang aming cultural, political, economic, social identity. Ano ba itong identity na to na gusto natin i-preserve at pagyamanin? Sana yung mga susunod na henerasyon, itong tanong na ito ay masagot nila at yung mga magre-represent sa amin na kung saan ang kanilang gagamitin na instrumento ay ang Bangsamoro government na sinasabi ko na mas powerful dahil ito ay may political autonomy. May political autonomy, may kakayahan na gumawa ng sariling batas na hindi na kailangan ipagpaalam pa sa national government. Mayroong economic autonomy na kung saan meron siyang napakalaking porsyento ng budget sa gobyerno. Bawat taon meron tayong 5% na block grant. Ano? Ibig sabihin, automatic yung taong bayan. Filipino nation pays for this. They pay for our autonomy. 5% ng budget ay binibigay automatic at walang question sa Bangsamoro. Magagamit ba ng tama at mapakikinabangan ba yan ng babu at bata, matanda, yung mga tao na marginalize at nasabi natin na kailangan ng development dahil tayo ang pinaka mababa sa Human Development Index? Yan ang magiging test na autonomy. Kasi ang tanong sa autonomy, para saan ba ang autonomiya kung hindi para sa development ng mga tao? So, yun po yung shared aspiration at sana masagot din one day pag nakausap ko yung mga taga-Sulu. Bakit ayaw nila sa autonomiya? Thank you po.
I agree with you. I think in the end, what we look at is the impact. Sino ba ang winners? Sino ba ang winners sa proseso na ito? Sa dulo ng autonomy, shared vision for a Bangsamoro region. So I don't know if Director Samira is still here, if she would like to add, but we're wrapping up. Just I guess one more question to all of you, for all our lecturers before we close the session. How hopeful are you that this coming election and then in the succeeding years will definitely realize that shared vision for the Bangsamoro people? Let's start with Bang. Then I move to Tony Maysara, and then I need to get to Tony still here, and then Aslen. Bang?
Hello. That's a difficult question, no?
Oo,
Well,
mas sila tayo magkita. Dapat difficult questions na.
how hopeful am I? Well, I've always been hopeful, like, personally, but then we also understand that our hopes are not like it does not exist in a vacuum, no? It is affected by external factors, and if I were to be candid at this point, may mga challenges doon sa optimism na yun. However, what I hold on to actually, katulad din ng sinabi ng other lecturers, no, and in relation to your previous question on having a shared vision or a shared aspiration, I think I could speak not just for myself, no, and not just as a Bangsamoro, but even as a Filipino. We all have shared aspirations for a better government, for a developed society, something that, you know, is inclusive to all, or yung kung ano man yung mga munting pangarap ng bawat isa ay makamit. Um, the challenge is on whether we all agree on how we can achieve that. That is actually really the main hurdle. And I remain hopeful that everyone in their own way looks into this kind of positive future. Um, but that, of course, this kind of optimism still has to be grounded, and there are efforts that has to be done for us to keep being hopeful. Kailangan din nating ipaglaban yung pag-asa na gusto natin or na tinatanaw natin. So, that's my answer.
Salamat, salamat, ma'am. Attorney Maysara, are you still hopeful? I mean, with all the quota for
After
women inclusion and
everything, no, you know, ang mga nangyari, Supreme Court na mismo, biro mo, nag-decide siya last minute. Sabi
yeah.
niya, yung sulu hindi nakasama. So, yung portion ng BOL na ginawa namin na uh, geographic areas, dapat may paalam ka muna sa mother unit, which is the autonomous region, hindi naman nasunod dahil sulu mismo, sinabi ng Supreme Court, as a province, they can opt out, no? Pero yung design namin doon sa aming ginawa na transitory provision, hindi pwede kasi just like the municipalities of Lanao del Norte, nagpaalam muna sila sa kanilang probinsya. At nung bumoto ang mga probinsya, ang 5 yata o 6 na munisipyo namin ng yes, sumama sila, hindi pumayag yung probinsya. So hindi sila nakaalis sa province of Lanao del Norte, no? Pero ito, yung sa amin naman, yung bumoto ng no, yung Sulu, pinayagan naman sila ng Supreme Court kahit kahit na hindi naman mas overwhelming. In fact, 1 million nga yung bumoto ng yes sa Bangsamoro more organic law sa kabuuan, no? So parang meron ako doon nakita na parang kaiba yata yung batayan, no? So parang meron din dapat tayong tingnan dyan in the future na maaaring para yung ating aspiration. Baka meron lang doong somewhere, somehow, na nagkulang sa pag-explain, no, sa Supreme Court. Or in the future, siguro may mangyayaring makabalik sila or I don't know, makaintindihan natin. Pero definitely yung hope nandyan pa din kasi hope springs eternal. Sa Islam, we always, Allah said, you do not fear, you do not grieve as long as you believe in me. So what is the meaning of that verse? That verse essentially is all about hope. No? Kasi we do not control the future. What we hold is only the present. And the present is very important. This coming election, This will be the metal in which the Bangsamoro Transition Authority will be tested kung gaano siya nagserbisyo sa mga tao at paano na magta-translate sa boto yung sinasabi na trust rating, no? Kasi at the end of the day, yung botante rin naman na magsasabi kung sino yung gusto nilang leader. Ang hope ko lang sana ay totoong election yan. Kasi alam naman natin na nagkakaroon ng problema along the way sa pag-iimplementa, no? Kasi yung mga issues during election ay napaka-strong sa area namin. Sana magkaroon ng totoong election para yung totoong boto ang lumabas. At ano ba yung role natin sa civil society? Napakalaki po kasi ngayon may oras tayo hanggang Marso. So tama yung sabi ni Kabsek, mas malaki ang oras ngayon na pagtibayin natin yung mga sinasabi nating mga signpost, guidepost, lahat para maka-arrive tayo sa genuine na election na more or less ma-approximate talaga kung sino yung binoto ng mga tao at umupo bilang leader nila. Whether nag-agree tayo o hindi sa outcome ng election, it's not our province to question the electorate because the will of the people is their voice of the sovereign. So kailangan natin yan sa puso na pumasok tayo sa demokrasya, kailangan tanggapin natin ang outcome ng demokrasya, pero along the way, kailangan natin paigtingin ang pagbabantay para makuha natin ang totoong boses ng masa. Yun lang po.
Maraming salamat, Atty. Maysara. Director Samira, if you're still here, if not, then we move to Kabsek Asnin to answer whether you're still hopeful.
I'll be quick. I'm still hopeful, otherwise. Kung hindi, sana hindi niyo ako kausap as Capsec ngayon. But kidding aside, hopeful or grounded on the realities on the ground, grounded on the nuances and the complexities involved in this difficult journey. Along with it, it's the humility to accept that you don't always see the whole picture. And with such humility comes the willingness to learn and adjust without compromising your core, without compromising your integrity. So I'll leave it at that. And we look forward to the first parliamentary elections of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao.
Maraming salamat, Kabsec Asnin. Maraming salamat, Atty. Maysara. Bam. Thank you very much, of course, kay Director Samira. What a very productive and engaging discussion this morning. I hope to all our participants, you pick up a few lessons. I mean, voting, we as part of the electorate, our duty never ends. And together, and of course, in the Bangsamoro region itself, that same duty has to be practiced, has to be imbibed by the people. And true representation needs to happen, not just for a few, but for all. The marginalized, the underrepresented, they need to have a voice in this electoral process. And of course, in the results later on, sustainability is the next question. So nakikita natin na magandang pag-usapan lagi ito, lalong-lalo na i-connect natin ito sa mga experiences of people on the ground, as what, for example, Rex Ramirez shared in Marawi City. Hindi malayong konsepto ang electoral democracy, hindi malayong konsepto ang inclusive Bangsamoro. Ito ay ramdam ng bawat isa sa atin, kahit na tayo ay nasa ibang rehiyon. At kami ko rito sa Maynila, Kalimbang. So inaasahan natin na lahat ay patuloy na magmasid, patuloy na mag-engage sa ganitong proseso. And we really hope for the best for the Bangsamoro region, because the success of the Bangsamoro people will definitely be the success of the Filipino people. So we want to thank all of you. We want to thank all the universities who participated today, our partners, to my fellow Shivners. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Please click on or scan the QR code for your feedback form. We will definitely appreciate hearing from you any additional points you'd like to raise, possible rooms for improvement and all. But of course, we would like to see you at the next Kafihan session. With that, Thank you very much and happy Friday to all of you. We have a photo. I think we'll have a photo
Yes.
for with everyone.
Oh, photo ops.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Ron. Good to see you. Always.
yeah,
Virtually or
yeah.
physically.
Kaya
If
nga eh.
everyone can turn on their camera.
Yes. Please switch on your camera so we can have a photo. Medyo marami lang, so I think si Nathan will do panels.
Yes. Okay, everyone keep smiling because we won't know which page you will be on. Sige. So we'll
Okay.
start with the page one. Oh, sorry. Medyo mabagal. If maybe Sir LCD is there,